Chapter 146. Brother Itachi. Sasuke wanted to say more to ask his brother, but all the words in his heart couldn't jump out of his mouth at this moment. He could only call his brother's name, hoping that his brother could give him an answer different from what he guessed. Sasuke. Let me test your tolerance, okay? Let me see if you are a qualified successor of the Uchiha clan. Itachi looked at Sasuke, and the words coming out of his mouth were exceptionally stiff and unapproachable. Brother, what are you talking about? What tolerance? What qualified successor? I don't understand. Did someone break into our house? Did you pick up this bloody sword in your hand to fight against the intruder? Itachi's words were completely incomprehensible to the young Sasuke. Little Sasuke could only use his limited imagination to fabricate a reasonable explanation for the person standing in front of him, who was suspected of killing his parents. Sasuke, don't you understand? I killed father and mother with my own hands for my own sake. All of this is to test my tolerance, to awaken the most powerful force belonging to the Uchiha clan. Itachi looked at Sasuke, and his dark eyes instantly turned into blood-red Sharingan. The most powerful force? Sasuke looked at the Sharingan in Itachi's eyes, which symbolized the highest glory of his clan, and couldn't help but repeat the words his brother just mentioned. Itachi's Sharingan, which originally had 3 tomo, began to rotate rapidly. Slowly, the tomo and the pupil in the middle of the eye connected together, turning into a strange triangular pinwheel-shaped icon that slowly rotated in Itachi's eye sockets. Yes, this is the evolved form of our Uchiha clan's Sharingan, Mangekyo Sharingan. Only the members of the Uchiha clan who truly have the power of transcendent being can have it. The path I chose was to kill my parents, and all the clansmen living outside. Brother, what are you doing? Parents, all the clansmen. How could it be? How could it be brother who killed them? Sasuke couldn't help but think of the faint fishy smell in the air when he entered the Uchiha land, and the overly quiet environment. If everything Itachi said was true, then his brother had killed thousands of innocent people for such an illusory goal of tolerance? Did that include his parents? I don't believe it. I will never believe that my brother would do such a thing. Sasuke shook his head vigorously. Maybe this was the only way to make himself more convinced of his own ideas. Itachi also saw that it was impossible to persuade his brother with words alone, so he looked directly at his brother with a pair of Mangekyo Sharingan. Is that so? Then I'll let you see with your own eyes. Tsukuyami. Sasuke fell into a black space at this moment, and the only ray of light was a bloody moon suspended in the sky. There were even 3 tomo Sharingan marks on the moon. Itachi stood in front of Sasuke with his back facing him. Brother, Sasuke wanted to open his mouth and call his brother's name, but he couldn't make a sound. When he found that he couldn't speak at all, Sasuke quickly ran to Itachi's side and wanted to grab his brother with his hand. But as soon as he reached out, his hand passed through Itachi Uchiha's body. His brother in front of him was just a shadow. Sasuke watched helplessly as his brother killed the Uchiha clansmen that he had been living with day and night. Some of these people lived next door to him. Some of them were his childhood playmates. Most of them were Uchiha clansmen whose faces he couldn't remember. I don't believe it, I don't believe it. I don't believe that my brother would do such a thing. That old-fashioned elder brother who had always been so gentle to him, who had always respectfully called his parents Lord Father and Lord Mother, would actually kill his parents and clansmen in exchange for power in order to test his tolerance. Do you see, this is what I did to make myself a qualified Uchiha clansman. Itachi appeared in the dark night sky like a god, with a blood-red full moon suspended behind him. And under Itachi's body, one Itachi figure after another appeared. Although their movements were different, their expressions were also different. But all of them were doing the same thing, killing. Killing without stopping. They were killing people as if they were uprooting weeds in a field. Blood splattered all over the sky, and screams echoed all around. These things were mercilessly accusing Itachi Uchiha's actions, Itachi's family, Uchiha's everything. Itachi's parents were all killed by him. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Sasuke covered his ears and closed his eyes. He wanted to make himself unable to hear those screams and see the blood splattering all over the sky. The cries were like the mournful wails of cuckoos, each of them crying blood. Sasuke had already begun to believe it, even though he tried his best to ignore everything that Itachi wanted to show him. But even though he covered his ears, the sorrowful cries still echoed in his mind. Even though he closed his eyes tightly, the smell of blood still rushed into his nose. Can't you hold on any longer? You still have to witness such a scene over and over again. Even if your mind is overwhelmed, even if you don't want to see these things at all. You still can't faint. You still have to witness these things again. Because, this is the Manjikyu Sharingan. This is the power of Tsukuyomi. My stupid brother. Itachi's voice still echoed, and the coldness contained in it became heavier and heavier. Only by doing this could his weak brother grow up to be able to face anyone's threat, to face any form of fear. To revive the Uchiha clan once again. Even if he couldn't revive the Uchiha clan, at least, he could survive. In the end, Sasuke fainted. The repeated mental stimulation caused Sasuke to fall to the ground the moment he left Tsukuyomi. As for Sasuke's eyes, they had unknowingly turned into a one-tomo Sharingan floating in them. A bloody tear flowed down Itachi's face. Looking at his brother, Itachi's eyes were filled with sadness and relief. For his brother, he was sad that he had to live alone from now on. For his brother, he was gratified that he could live from now on. Chapter 147. Holding his brother, Itachi walked out of his house step by step. Itachi couldn't help but look back at the place where he grew up. This is the place where he spent most of his time. But it's also the place where he will never be able to return to in his life. Itachi guessed in his heart that maybe he will never set foot in this area in his life. After all, whether it's the things that he cherished or those that accompanied him growing up, they were all destroyed by him. His steps were still firm. Everything he did in the future would be so that his younger brother could take charge and survive on his own. Even if the premise is that his brother will hate him and only want to get rid of him, it's fine. Everything is done, Itachi said to Danzo, who was standing opposite him. Very good, from now on, you will be the S-class ninja who betrayed Woodleaf after destroying the Uchiha clan, Itachi Uchiha. Woodleaf will mobilize all forces to capture you. Danzo looked at Itachi and coldly made a judgment for him. At the same time, several root ninjas walked to the opposite side of Itachi and reached out to take Sasuke, who was in Itachi's arms. Remember your promise to me, let Sasuke live a healthy and safe life. Itachi didn't immediately hand over his brother in his hands, but looked at Danzo to confirm the deal between them. That's for sure. I'll definitely do what I've promised you. Danzo didn't even look at Itachi and just said. You can go and confirm the death of my parents, but I want to take their bodies away. You can't violate them. Itachi said, but Danzo wasn't happy. Is this part of our deal? Those are my parents, I will not allow them to have their eyes gouged out like those Uchiha clan members who were slaughtered by you. Leave their bodies intact, I will take them away and bury them properly. This is my last request. Danzo waved his hand, and several root ninjas walked out. Go and confirm the death of Uchiha clan's clan head Uchiha Fugaku and his wife Uchiha Mikoto. Several root ninjas quickly disappeared, but a moment later, one of them walked to Danzo's side and whispered a few words to Danzo. The remaining root ninjas also came out with the bodies of Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto, but there was an obvious wound on their necks. Their throats were once again cut by the root ninjas to confirm their death. Remember, this is the only and last time you will act on your own initiative. Danzo looked at Itachi to warn him. Itachi didn't say anything. He just took his parents' bodies, and brought them away, one in each hand. Looking at his parents' grave, it was already far away from the wood leaf. Whether it was Uchiha Fugaku or Uchiha Mikoto, there was no tombstone on their graves. It was just two lonely little mounds under such a big tree. Perhaps Itachi chose this place because he didn't want his parents to suffer the cruelty of the wind and rain even after they died. Looking at his parents' grave, Itachi was silent for a long time before leaving. Not long after Itachi left, several root ninjas came out to check the grave again. After confirming that it was indeed Uchiha Fugaku and his wife, they left this place. These root ninjas are really careful. They actually came to check again. Should I say that they are really worthy of being root ninjas? Nangongja also came out from the shadows and confirmed that there were no hidden sentries around. Nangongja began to dig out the bodies of Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto. Carefully returning the grave to its original state, Nangongja took the bodies of Uchiha Fugaku and his wife to the Lion Clan's dimension. Who? Itachi felt an aura following him from behind. After confirming that he was far away from his parents' grave, Itachi called out to the figure that was following him. I hope Nangongja can save my parents? Without giving Itachi more time to think, a huge pitcher plant appeared behind him. Looking at the black cover with red clouds on Zetsu's body, Itachi's eyes were a bit dazed. It seems that you know about us. Zetsu looked at Itachi's reaction and realized that Itachi actually knew about the organization he belonged to. When Nine Tails attacked the village, the Uchiha clan also had a detailed record. After all, whether it's the mysterious person who can arm wrestle with Yondaime Hokage or the 3-tomo Sharingan mark in Nine Tails eye socket, for the Uchiha clan, it's information that must be collected. Itachi didn't intend to lie to Zetsu. After all, a ninja of this level can distinguish whether a person is telling the truth or not. He. I didn't expect our organization to have reached such a prestigious level. Zetsu's words were strange. Obviously he was praising his organization, but there was a different kind of joking tone in his voice. Then, everything will be easy. Our organization is an organization that recruits all S-class ninjas. We take in all the ninjas who left the village and give them shelter. At the same time, they will also serve our organization when the organization needs them. Well, a ninja who betrayed the wood leaf and wiped out his own family must need our organization's protection, right? Serve your organization, and you will provide me shelter? Itachi repeated the conditions proposed by Zetsu, and listening to Itachi's retelling, Zetsu nodded and gave an affirmation. How can you prove that you can shelter me? You know, I betrayed the wood leaf. The crimes I have committed are enough for Konoha to issue the highest level of arrest warrant to the shinobi world. How to protect you? Can I? Zetsu didn't have time to speak, another voice sounded. Although Itachi noticed that someone was following him early, it was just a subconscious reaction. When Zetsu came out, Itachi also carefully checked his surroundings again, but he didn't expect that there was someone hiding here. The person who came out had orange hair, and his face was decorated with strange black ornaments. Naturally, the person who came out was also wearing the Akatsuki's signature black cover with red clouds. The most peculiar thing was his eyes. There were circles of ripples distributed in his white eyes. Reincarnation. Eyes, Itachi couldn't help but say such a sentence. Chapter 148. Looking at pain in front of him, even Itachi couldn't help but be in a trance at the moment. That's the eye of the legendary sage of the Six Paths, known as the ancestor of the shinobi world. In the mythical stories he has read since he was a child, this person's name will never be missing. Originally, Itachi thought that such a person was just a fictional character in the past, but now the eyes representing this mythical character appeared in front of him. Don't ask Itachi if he didn't suspect that this eye was fake, because the moment pain came out, the majestic momentum and the suppression from the bloodline appeared in Itachi's heart, and it was difficult to dispel. How about it? As the successor of Sage of the Six Paths, do I have enough qualifications to shelter you? Pain's eyes narrowed, like a god looking down at his believers who were prostrating at his feet. It was obviously a question, but it was full of a kind of undeniable majesty. Itachi knew that he had lost the right to veto. As long as he still wants to live, as long as he still wants to watch his brother grow step by step, then he has to crawl at the feet of such a godlike character. But Itachi is not willing. Itachi's pride does not allow him to crawl at the feet of others. Ha! Itachi's mouth made a low roar, and a powerful chakra burst out of his body. In an instant, he broke through Pain's momentum lock. I don't want to give in to anyone anymore. Amaterasu. The triangular pinwheel in Itachi's eyes rotated quickly, and even his eyes seemed to be overwhelmed and began to shed a line of blood tears. Seeing that Itachi seemed to want to resist, Zetsu couldn't stand it anymore. It was him who suggested to pull Itachi into his organization, but now Itachi started to resist without giving him face. Zetsu took a step forward and seemed to be about to attack. But just as Zetsu took the first step, Pain stretched out a hand and stopped him. Humph. It doesn't matter. Since he wants to understand my strength well, then I will give him this opportunity. Only in this way can he really be convinced. Let's work hard for our goals. Even in the face of the attack of Manjikyu Sharingan, the evolved form of Sharingan, Pain still looked calm. It's like a house cat naughtily wants to catch its owner, and the owner is just waiting for a good time to kick it hard to let it know the majesty of the owner. Ignored. Even if he has the Manjikyu Sharingan, this godlike man standing in front of him still looks down on him like this. Itachi didn't lose control of his emotions, but being despised by others, he will be very angry, let alone Itachi who has been regarded as a genius since he was a child. A black flame floated out along Itachi's line of sight, and attacked Pain at an extremely fast speed. God! God! Pain stretched out a hand, but there wasn't the slightest chakra fluctuation. Of pain of pain. Then, heaven and earth seemed to listen to Pain's command. A strong repulsive force appeared out of nowhere. The Amaterasu, which was shapeless to begin with, had taken on the shape of a black flame because it had swallowed everything around it, was repelled by the repulsive force. It landed on a nearby tree and swallowed the tree mercilessly. Are you convinced? Pain asked indifferently, but Itachi didn't say a word, just took out a few kunai. With his proficient kunai throwing technique, he threw them at Pain. It seems that you still don't understand my power, Shinra Tensei. The power just now was activated again, and several kunai were bounced away in an instant. Itachi was surprised, such a heaven-defying skill was actually released so easily. He thought that the reason why Pain was able to bounce his Amaterasu was because he had already made the hand seals of this powerful ninjutsu in advance, but now the situation is simply instant ninjutsu. 10,000. Elephant. God. Guide. Pain stretched out his palm again and aimed at Itachi. Unlike the strong repulsive force just now, this time Pain made a strong gravitational force. Even if Itachi tried his best to break free from the attraction of gravity, standing on the ground was still a drop in the bucket. After a short struggle, Itachi was attracted to it. Pain's palm grabbed Itachi's neck fiercely, and Itachi stared directly at Pain's eyes. Are you wondering why your genjutsu didn't work? Itachi was slightly surprised, because what Pain said at the moment was also what he wanted to ask the most. As a ninja, Itachi's strongest is never ninjutsu or taijutsu, but under the blessing of Sharingan, almost no one can resist genjutsu. Just now, Itachi looked directly at Pain's eyes for 2 seconds. Even people with high genjutsu resistance will fall into Itachi's genjutsu at this moment. He saw himself turning into a cluster of crows and flying around. But Pain didn't have any abnormality at all, he was not affected by genjutsu at all. Itachi's heart became fierce, and the triangular pinwheels in his eyes began to spin quickly. A purple flame rose from Itachi's body, and in a moment, it had turned into a huge skeleton dyed with purple chakra flames. The skeleton held a sword in one hand and a shield in the other, and Itachi's height was instantly raised. From a high place, he looked down at Pain, who was standing at the foot of the giant he summoned. Susanoo, the secret of Manjikyu Sharingan that appears after a pair of Manjikyu Sharingan is used to the extreme? Looking at the huge skeleton standing in front of him, Pain muttered softly. Although the voice was very small, it still reached Itachi's ears. This move was imprinted in his mind after he awakened Manjikyu Sharingan. Although he was not proficient, Itachi still used it. Such a thing, Pain, who is not a member of the Uchiha clan, is actually more clear than the Uchiha clan. When he first saw Pain before, there was a faint suppression from the bloodline in his heart. Itachi had some speculations in his heart. There is definitely an unknown relationship between Sharingan and Rinnegan. But at this moment, Itachi didn't have time to think about these things at all. Instead, he manipulated the huge skeleton outside his body, Susanoo, to raise the giant sword in his hand. It slashed fiercely towards Pain. Chapter 149. The huge sword, under the control of Susanoo, slashed towards Pain, who was standing at his feet. Itachi could feel that he had hit the target, and the huge force even stirred up the dust in the sky. But Zetsu, who was watching the battle from the side, didn't react at all. He seemed to be very confident in the leader of his organization. Under such an attack, as the leader of his organization, he would never fail. And the facts seemed to be on Zetsu's side. After the smoke and dust settled, everything was displayed in front of everyone. Pain actually relied on his own pair of palms to directly take the full force of Susanoo's attack. And even the ground under his feet was not affected in the slightest. The 1 meter square ground under his feet stood alone on the ground like a pillar, lifting Pain high like a god. Other than that, the height of the ground dropped by at least a meter. In fact, it was not appropriate to say that Pain took the attack of Susanoo with his own hands, because the giant sword in Susanoo's hand was about 5 or 6 centimeters away from Pain's palm. The huge repulsive force and the power of the giant sword of Susanoo offset each other, confronting each other like this. Impossible. This was the first sentence after the real battle between Itachi and Pain began, and the tone of their words was full of disbelief. No. All of this is real. Because I have the eyes of God. I was sent to the world by God to reshape everything and bring peace to the world. When Pain said this sentence, his mood was no longer as indifferent as before. There was a sense of madness in his eyes, which was a kind of fanatical belief in himself. If such a person was pulled to other places, he would definitely be scolded as mentally ill, and then be sent to the local mental hospital for treatment. But Itachi couldn't refute this person's words at all. Whether it was this person's eyes or this person's power, it was just as Pain said. He was God. A God who was really different from ordinary human beings. Looking at Itachi's eyes, Pain knew that the proud man in front of him had actually been conquered by him. The corner of his mouth pulled out a stiff smile, which made Zetsu, who was standing next to him, stunned. This Pain actually smiled? Even though it was still so stiff, it was a genuine smile on his face. It was incredible. It's time to end this. Pain looked at the giant sword in front of him and seemed to be a little impatient. Thus, he gently raised his hand, as if he was holding up a ball of cotton, and raised the huge sword high into the air. Shinra Tensei. The huge repulsive force struck again, overturning Susanoo and its sword to the ground. Just now, Pain still didn't use his strongest power. This was Itachi's last thought before he fainted. After that, he fell into a deep coma. Zu ran to Pain's side and hugged Itachi in his arms. Pain, who was next to him, also disappeared in a few flashes. Only Zu, who was standing in the same place, looked at Itachi in her arms. After that, she brought Itachi into the ground and disappeared. Only the huge pit on the ground and the giant tree that was still burning with black fire proved that there was an unusually fierce battle here just now, but the woodleaf barrier class ninjas had to go so far to seal such an unknown black fire. Not far from the battlefield, two figures were hiding in a giant tree made of paper. Nagato stood in a strange container, his whole body was skinny, and there were several terrible black iron rods on his back. Conan, who had purple hair with a white paper flower on it, looked at Nagato in front of her and couldn't help but ask, although this Itachi does have some potential, recruiting him will also improve the strength of our organization. But, Nagato, why are you so happy? Yes, at this moment, Nagato's face was actually a little bit smiling. Unlike the stiff smile on Pain's face, Nagato had a very natural smile at this moment. If you ignore his dry hair and thin face, presumably this smile will be a little warmer, right? Conan. This Uchiha clansman unconsciously reminds me of Yahiko. The same strong, the same sacrificial spirit. In fact, it's not so important whether I can recruit him into our organization or not. It's just that his image in my heart gradually overlaps with Yahiko's, as long as he's in our organization. I will always think of Yahiko, the original intention of our Akatsuki, and my current goal. When Conan heard Yahiko's name, there was a deep sadness in her eyes. Whether it was Yahiko's body that was made into Pain Tendo's body, or Itachi, who was now recruited, Nagato gave her a warning. She didn't forget her original intention, and with Yahiko's dream, she wanted to turn this world into the dream of the three of them when they were children, a world without worries, without disputes, without war. However, Conan still faintly asked herself in her heart. Even if Nagato has the Rinnegan, even if he has the help of the Uchiha Madara, can they really create such an illusory and unreal world? Conan didn't have the answer in her heart, but she still firmly looked at Nagato next to her. In any case, she has lost Yahiko, and she absolutely can't lose Nagato. Since Nagato has decided to carry out such a plan, then all she can do is try her best to help him. Even if she can't, she must try her best to protect him and keep him away from danger. Conan has never believed in this whimsical plan, nor did she believe in the masked man who has been hiding himself. Conan just wanted to protect Nagato, that's all. She had no other demands. When Itachi opened his eyes again, he found himself in a crypt. The surroundings were a little dark, with only a few oil lamps hanging on the walls, providing a little bit of light to the crypt. A figure stood in front of him, holding a robe, a ring, and a hat decorated with several small bells that covered his entire face. A head of orange hair and eyes with circles of ripples was enough to prove who the person standing in front of him was. It was the leader of the Akatsuki, Pain, who he couldn't do anything to. Chapter 150. There was no need for the author to retell what happened later. Facing Pain, who had no power to resist, Itachi could only silently accept the Akatsuki uniform. On the other side, in the Lion Clan's different dimension, Nangongja stood in the hut originally built by Mashiro, looking at the Uchiha Fugaku couple lying quietly on the bed. His face was a little worried. Because in the beginning, although Itachi's attack was heavy, there was still room to save them. When Nangongja took out the bodies of the Uchiha couple from the simple grave built by Itachi, he also found the wound that was later added by the root ninja. This wound was a bit tricky. Nangongja didn't dare to guarantee that his sister could save these two people. Finally, Nangongro stopped treating the Uchiha couple. How is it? Nangongja immediately asked anxiously. The situation is not optimistic. Nangongro's words made Nangongja's heart sink. This is not a good omen. But fortunately, they took the turtle-breathing pill in advance, and Big Brother, you brought them here. I have now stitched up their wounds, but they can't leave the Lion Clan's different dimension for a long time. After all, the natural energy in the air of the ninja world is too thin compared to the Lion Clan's different dimension, and all kinds of bacteria may cause secondary damage to their bodies. So they need to recuperate for a while. Nangongja knew that his goal has actually been achieved. As long as the lives of the Uchiha couple are saved, he can stand on the same side as Itachi Uchiha. All kinds of plans in the future will be possible to be carried out. How long will it take for them to wake up? Nangongja asked his sister. This is not certain, because strictly speaking, they are still in a critical period. If it was an ordinary person, they would have already become vegetative, but considering the physical advantage of the ninja and the innate spiritual power of the Uchiha clan, they should wake up in 3 to 5 days. Nangong-ro made a comprehensive analysis of the physical condition of the Uchiha couple and made a judgment. Well, let's wait for them to wake up and talk about other things. In fact, time passed so quickly, but in just 5 days, the Uchiha couple has already woken up. At this moment, the two can't eat normal food, so they can only eat a little liquid food. But they can still talk to each other. What's the situation of the Uchiha family now? After Uchiha Fugaku woke up, he began to ask Nangongja the question he was most concerned. Strictly speaking, the Uchiha clan doesn't exist anymore. In the knowledge of the ninja world, now the Uchiha clan is only left with Itachi Uchiha and Uchiha Sasuke. Now, counting you and Uchiha Yuri Koyuri who I brought here, the Uchiha clan should be only 5 people left. As for those who were not in the Uchiha base during the night of the extermination, I believe that Danzo will not let them go. Nangongja didn't sympathize with Uchiha Fugaku's mood so gently, but he said so cruelly to Fugaku. In fact, Fugaku didn't have much expectation that Uchiha could survive, but when Nangongja directly told him the reality, it was inevitable that his heart sank, and his mood was a little depressed. Sigh. Well. It's good that Sasuke and Itachi can survive. Mikoto seemed to see that her husband was actually very uncomfortable, so she stretched out her hand and grabbed her husband's hand. Look at it, at least our children are still alive. And there is a little girl who was lucky enough to escape such a dangerous situation, right? Fugaku suddenly said to Nangongja, can you also call the little girl named Yuri Koyuri? Although Yuri Koyuri originally belonged to the conservative faction in the Uchiha clan, these insignificant factions have long been meaningless. At this time, Uchiha Fugaku called Yuri Koyuri, nothing more than to tell Yuri Koyuri some secrets about the Uchiha clan. Whether it was Nangongjo or Nangong-ro, they have already seen through this. So after the two called Yuri Koyuri, they didn't go in, but chatted outside. Oni-san, this time you and Danzo fell out. In fact, it can be regarded as a disguised form of falling out with Woodleaf. Even if you really go back to Woodleaf, presumably the estrangement between you two will be extremely deep. Oni-san, what are you going to do? In fact, Nangong-ro has been thinking about this problem since her brother brought Uchiha Fugaku and his wife to the Lion clan's different space, but because of Uchiha Fugaku and his wife's injuries, she didn't have time to ask her brother these questions. Now, she finally took advantage of the fact that Uchiha Fugaku was going to talk to Yuri Koyuri, so she asked the question that had been in her heart for a long time. In fact, it's not as serious as you think. It's true that this time I fell out with Woodleaf, but it doesn't mean that I fell out with 3 generations Hokage and a group of ninjas I met in Woodleaf. Woodleaf seems very open, but in fact, they are still vigilant in the face of people like me who have the strength to join Woodleaf. Since I began to stand out on the battlefield, I don't know how many people began to secretly send a lot of people to watch us. So, from the beginning, our relationship with Woodleaf was not as close as you think. If I have to use words to describe it, I'm more like a mercenary recruited by Woodleaf. Working for Woodleaf, Woodleaf provides me with a certain amount of protection. Danzo and 3 generations have always been at odds. This time because of various interests, they cooperated to deal with the Uchiha clan. This time, although I completely stood on the opposite side of Danzo, but in the battle between the two sides, didn't I firmly push myself to the side of 3 generations? Nangongja said a lot, but in the end, what he meant was that he only fell out with Danzo on the surface, but he was still in an ambiguous state with 3 generations. So Woodleaf will not be in a hostile state with him at all. Then, brother, do you still want to go back to Woodleaf? As soon as the words came out, Nangong felt that she asked a stupid question. Because although Nangongzhe and Woodleaf did not completely go against each other, but in this situation, if he still went back, wouldn't he be in a hurry to be looked down upon? Nangongzhe did not answer his sister's question, but looked down at the god's retribution sword in his hand. The corner of his mouth slightly drooped, as if he had made a decision. Chapter 151. Nangongzhe opened a scroll in his hand and a crow psychic beast appeared on his shoulder. Nangongzhe put his mouth close to the crow and whispered a few words. Then, he reached out his hand and patted the crow's head. The crow then flew off from Nangongzhe's shoulder and went to find its master. That's right. At this moment, Nangongzhe had already left the Lion Clan space. He also sent the information about Itachi Uchiha's parents to Itachi. It could be said that he had completed a small task that he had to complete. Then, Nangongzhe looked at his surroundings and a slight bitter smile appeared on his face. Why is there no other place besides the forest around me? Nangongzhe still felt that he wouldn't be able to see anything clearly if he stood on the ground. Thus, he gathered his internal force and attached it to the soles of his feet, allowing him to quickly run to the top of the tallest tree around him. The wind slightly blew the treetops, causing Nangongzhe to slightly sway along with the treetops. This place was so desolate that it was a bit scary. He could only faintly see a wisp of smoke slowly floating up from the end of the sky. It was true. This place was not close to Nangongzhe. Even with Nangongzhe's leg strength, he estimated that he would need to run at full speed for nearly 10 minutes to reach this place. Senior banishment, why didn't he just tell me where I was? Yet, he only gave me such a vague location, and then pretentiously told me, the sword will guide you in the right direction. At that time, I was too embarrassed to tell Senior Lizhe about it. It was really too different from his style. Woodleaf finally understood the Uchiha matter. Nangongzhe's mood also slightly relaxed. He actually had the energy to joke about the genius who had taught him before, banishment. However, Nangongzhe still very obediently pulled out the tribulation sword in his hand from its scabbard and used the tip of the sword to sweep the surroundings. He very seriously felt the fluctuations from the tribulation sword. This is the place. Nangongzhe's eyes, which were originally tightly shut, suddenly opened and looked in a certain direction. It was the place where the smoke was rising from. Nangongzhe's ankle shook and released a wave of energy. Nangongzhe was like a huge bird flying across the sky. Soon, Nangongzhe arrived at the place where the smoke was rising. To Nangongzhe's surprise, this place was not like what Nangongzhe had imagined. It was not a small settlement with only a few families. Instead, it had a large population. Nangongzhe took 2 steps forward and sat down in a very simple-looking straw hut. "Sir, may I know what you would like to order?" Soon, a waiter dressed as a waiter walked to Nangongzhe's side. Although he was greeting him, there was a bit of awkwardness in his voice. It was obvious that this small town did not have many outsiders, so the waiter and Nangongzhe had some difficulty talking to each other. "I'm also new here, so I'm not too familiar with what you have. Why don't you just give me your best wine and some side dishes?" Nangongzhe said very casually. Ever since he had cultivated with the banishment for a period of time, Nangongzhe had become more and more addicted to the temptation of wine. Since he had come to a new place, he naturally had to try some of the local wine. Although this was a small town, wasn't it very normal to have good wine in the alleys? Nangongzhe put the Heaven's Tribulation sword in his hand on the table. The sound made the waiter slightly look sideways. The waiter was originally worried that his table would be damaged by Nangongzhe, but after seeing the Heaven's Tribulation sword, he couldn't help but stare. Seeing that the waiter was in a daze in front of him, Nangongzhe coughed slightly, pulling the waiter's thoughts back to reality. Sorry, almost no one here practices martial arts. So when you put the sword on the table, I couldn't help but look at it a few more times." The waiter tried hard to explain his behavior, and Nangongzhe also looked at the waiter deeply, then laughed and said, "It doesn't matter, the weapon I use is rarely used in the entire ninja world. It doesn't matter if you look at it a few more times. Go, bring my wine and side dishes first." The waiter nodded, then took a few steps back and walked to the side of the shopkeeper, who looked a little old standing next to the counter. He put his mouth close to the shopkeeper's ear and whispered a few words. The shopkeeper also opened his eyes. After glancing at Nangongzhe, he waved his hand and seemed to agree with the waiter's proposal. This wine shop is not simple. Nangongzhe already had some thoughts in his mind. Since it was a place that Banishment Senpai told him, it naturally wouldn't be that simple. So Nangongzhe paid more attention to everything around him. The waiter quickly put Nangongzhe's side dishes on the table. It was very simple, just a dish of stir-fried vegetables and a plate of fried peanuts. But Nangongzhe's wine took a long time to be brought over by the waiter. There was some soil on the wine jar, and the red paper was wrapped in the soil. This was obviously a jar of aged wine that had been stored in the cellar for a long time. Nangongzhe looked at the wine jar, and the faint trace of unhappiness in his heart was thrown away. "Waiter, this wine is..." Drinking wine was never as simple as drinking it, and Nangongzhe knew that it was like this. Generally speaking, when he saw a wine that he had never seen before, Nangongzhe would ask the seller to briefly introduce the brewing process and storage method. Anyway, it was just a brief introduction, and no one would hide anything. At this moment, Nangongzhe's habit was acting up. "Sir, if you ask me when and how this wine was brewed, I really can't answer at all. Because since I was young, this wine jar has been buried in the backyard of our wine shop. I vaguely heard the shopkeeper say that there was no one who could brew this kind of wine. Drinking a jar means there is one less jar. So this wine jar has always been buried. Just now, I told the shopkeeper that you wanted to drink wine, and the shopkeeper looked at you and felt that you were also a wine lover. That's why he asked me to take out this jar of wine." As the waiter spoke, the shopkeeper had already arrived beside Nangongzhe. He glanced at the Heaven's Calamity sword that Nangongzhe had placed on the table, and quickly looked away. He said to Nangongzhe, "Don't listen to this nonsense. Don't listen to this brat's nonsense. What kind of eyes do I have to be able to tell whether a person likes wine or not? It's just that I suddenly thought of the taste of this wine, and I couldn't help but crave it. But this kid is a drunkard, so I wanted to drink a few cups with you." Chapter 152. Hearing the shopkeeper's words, the waiter shut his mouth and could not help but smile. He stood to the side and gently poked the red paper that sealed the wine. A strong wine aroma spread out from the wine jar. After Nangongzhe smelled the wine aroma, he raised his eyebrows slightly. However, he did not say anything. He just quietly watched the waiter put the wine in the wine jar into a slightly rough white porcelain jug using a bamboo container. The shopkeeper also stood up and took out a pair of wine glasses made of jasper from the shabby counter. It was obviously a shabby wine shop, but there was a pair of expensive wine glasses. It was really strange. When I drink ordinary wine, I usually don't bear to take out this pair of ancestral jasper glasses. However, today's wine must be served with a jasper glass to truly appreciate its color and taste. The shopkeeper took the two jasper glasses and walked to the small table where Nangongzhe was sitting. One glass was placed in front of Nangongzhe, and the other glass was placed in front of him. Nangongzhe picked up the glass and gently rubbed it with his hand. The wonderful touch of the jasper and the slightly cold feeling passed through his fingertips to Nangongzhe's heart. Although this pair of glasses had been kept by the shopkeeper, they were usually not used. However, it was obvious that the shopkeeper would take them out from time to carefully maintain them. It was enough to show the shopkeeper's love for them. The waiter held the white porcelain jug and stood beside Nangongzhe. Nangongzhe also understood and put the glass in his hand on the table. Perhaps the white porcelain jug had been heated before. The wine that was poured out emitted wisps of smoke in the slightly cold air. After the wine was heated, the aroma of the wine was even more obvious. Young friend. It's rare for wine lovers to gather together. Why don't we have a drink together? The shopkeeper raised his glass and said to Nangongzhe. All right. In this ninja world, most people like the tasteless sake. Although sake also had its own taste, I liked this kind of aged wine. It wasn't because of its rich taste. It's just because it suits me the most. Nangongzhe took his blanket and gently touched the blanket in the shopkeeper's hand. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they slowly took a sip from the wine glass in their hands. The cold feeling of the jasper and the warm feeling of the wine merged into one, giving a different kind of experience. This wine. Actually, Nangongzhe had drunk it before. He had even drunk it quite a few times, but Nangongzhe did not show it. With good wine in front of them, they naturally had to drink before talking about other things. The two of them had simple dishes to go with the wine and started to drink together. Gradually, it seemed that the alcohol was taking effect. The shopkeeper, who looked a little old, had a dazed look in his eyes as he stroked his beard that almost reached his chest. When the ancients drank, they were often full of literary interest. From time to time, they would sing and write lyrics. This old man's talent is not high, so naturally, I can't write a lot of beautiful poems like the ancients. But I have heard a few words, which can be regarded as singing the mind of the people who drink. If the guest doesn't mind, this old man will also show his incompetence. Nangongzhe naturally wouldn't stop him, so he nodded and motioned the shopkeeper to sing. Ha ha ha. Then this old man will show his incompetence. Don't you see, the water of the yellow river comes from the sky, rushing to the sea and never returning. Don't you see, the bright mirror of the hall is sad, white hair in the morning is like black hair in the evening. The more the shopkeeper sang, the more passionate he became. His voice, which was a little hoarse, was now more vigorous and tragic. Nangongzhe was also affected by the shopkeeper's singing. He took the bamboo chopsticks in his hand and tapped the jasper cup in his hand. Whether it was the human voice or the tapping sound, it formed an indescribable harmony. As the feelings of the two became more and more agitated, an invisible force began to spread out uncontrollably. Even the shabby wine shed was affected by the two of them. Some of the dust in the corners that couldn't be cleaned were stirred up by the force and scattered down. However, the force was maintained in the wine shop and didn't spread out at all. The waiter, who was standing by the side and adding wine for the two of them, wasn't frightened by such a strange scene at all. On the contrary, he was still very calm. With a smile, he held the wine pot and looked at the two people who were singing in front of him. This song wasn't considered long. Even if the two of them were singing softly and at a slower speed, there was still a time when it ended. Who will be exchanged for good wine, and with you, we will quell the worries of eternity. When the shopkeeper sang the last line, his voice had clearly stopped, but his voice still echoed in the tavern. The word worries seemed to contain an unusual force. It echoed for a long time and didn't dissipate. Wine, this is indeed good wine. Nangongzhe raised the cup that still had a little bit of wine in it and drank it all in one gulp. Then, he looked at the shopkeeper and chuckled, this person is also a wonderful person. That's right. As Nangongzhe expected, the shopkeeper wasn't simple at all. When the shopkeeper started to sing, Nangongzhe felt that the shopkeeper began to emit a force that was different from chakra. This force was the inner strength that Nangongzhe was very familiar with. Therefore, Nangongzhe cooperated with the shopkeeper and began to inject his inner strength into the bamboo chopsticks in his hand. While he was tapping the wine cup, Nangongzhe was also using the tapping sound to test the shopkeeper. The strength of the two of them began to increase, and their strength began to resonate with each other. In the beginning, the two of them were still able to control it and restrain the resonance. However, in the end, the strength became stronger and stronger. The two of them could only restrain a part of their strength and watch as the excess energy dissipated and began to affect the wine shop. However, there seemed to be a barrier around the wine shop that could block the inner strength. Therefore, the strength of the two of them continued to reverberate in this small area of the wine shop. The shopkeeper wasn't an ordinary person, and so was the waiter. If an ordinary person received the impact of the resonance formed by the strength of the shopkeeper and Nangongzhe, they would definitely suffer some internal injuries. If their body was better, they would just not vomit blood on the spot. However, the waiter still acted naturally during this period. From time to time, he would add wine to the cups in Nangongzhe and the shopkeeper's hands. He seemed excessively normal. Ha ha ha. This wine, I'm sure you've already recognized it, right? If you can't recognize it, you can't be considered the successor of that existence. The shopkeeper looked at Nangongzhe and placed the wine cup in his hand in front of his nose. He sniffed lightly and asked Nangongzhe. Chapter 153. Nangongzhe didn't pay attention to what the shopkeeper said. He just put the wine cup to his mouth and drank the remaining wine in the cup. He took the Heaven's Disaster Sword that he had just put on the table, stood up, and held the Heaven's Disaster Sword horizontally in front of his chest. He said to the shopkeeper and the waiter, "Here is the Heaven's Disaster Sword, everyone of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Greet the head." That's right, the shopkeeper and the waiter were actually the backup left by the banishment for Nangongzhe. They belonged to the banishment's faction, the Blood Cloth Pavilion. The ultimate purpose of Nangongzhe coming here was to conquer this organization. The old wine that the shopkeeper took out for Nangongzhe was the wine in the green jade gourd left by the banishment for Nangongzhe. It was also the favorite wine of the banishment, the drunken immortal wine. When the shopkeeper and the waiter saw Nangongzhe's posture, they knelt on the ground without saying a word. They said respectfully, "Greetings, Supreme Sword." Supreme Sword? It seems that the two of you don't recognize my strength? You only worship the sword, but not the person? Nangongzhe smiled slightly, although there was some tension in his heart. But he didn't immediately attack, he just said with a somewhat unfriendly tone. In fact, Nangongzhe knew that even if he really came here with the Heaven's Disaster Sword, they wouldn't immediately kneel. They wouldn't immediately bow their heads and kowtow to him. Instead, they offered their loyalty without hesitation. The Blood Cloth Pavilion was actually a kind of force that was close to being hidden from the world. Unless it was a real threat to their survival, they wouldn't appear in the world. This was also the reason why there was no news about the Blood Cloth Pavilion in the ninja world. Guest, you must be joking. Although our Blood Cloth Pavilion is not a tyrannical force in the ninja world. However, we can't just directly worship a person who wields the Heavenly Tribulation Sword as our head disciple. If your excellency can be recognized, then it is only right and proper for you to be the head. However, if your excellency is unable to obtain recognition, then we will naturally provide your excellency with some help when your excellency needs it. The person who spoke was naturally the shopkeeper who was happily drinking with Nangongzhe just now. Recognition? Nangongzhe repeated the important words that the shopkeeper mentioned. The Blood Cloak Pavilion is a faction founded by a legendary inner force cultivator, the Banishment of Banishment. After the death of the Banishment ancestor, the Blood Cloak Pavilion has always been empty. The altar masters of the subordinate 5-element altars would discuss and decide the matters of the Blood-clad Pavilion. Since you want to sit at the head of the table, the Heavenly Tribulation Sword is naturally an important factor. But Your Excellency still needs the approval of the 5 elemental sanctum's altar masters, right? The shopkeeper smiled and said to Nangongzhe. Then I wonder which altar master of the 5 element altars is the shopkeeper? Although Nangongzhe can't be said to be standing at the top of the ninja world, he can be regarded as one of the top few people in the ninja world. The strength of a Kage-level ninja is not just for show. When the shopkeeper and Nangongzhe were drinking, Nangongzhe had already sensed the shopkeeper's specific strength. At the very least, the shopkeeper was comparable to an elite jonin in the ninja world, and if an inner force cultivator mastered a decent martial art, they could be comparable to a Kage-level ninja. A person with this kind of strength would be an extremely powerful high-end force in any force. Thank you for your praise. This old man is now the altar master of the Blood Cloak Pavilion's Blue Wood altar. Those of us who have reached the altar master level have abandoned our original names according to the rules. The name of the altar is my name. You can just call this old man Qingmu. Blue Wood altar. Nangongzhe looked at the shopkeeper in front of him. No, it should be the old man called Blue Wood now, and he had some thoughts in his mind. In that case, Blue Wood altar master, please take me to see the other 4 altar masters of the 5-element altars. Don't worry, don't worry. Old man Qingmu stretched out his hand and waved it slightly, indicating for Nangongzhe not to be so anxious. Although my blood clothing pavilion is a hidden force, there are still all kinds of trivial matters. It will take time to gather all the altar masters scattered all over the ninja world. Just now, this old man has sent a message to the other altar masters. Presumably, they will pay special attention to the appearance of the descendant of the banishment sect. It will take some time for them to arrive here, so it would be better for you to rest for a few days under this old man's arrangement. When all the altar masters come back, this old man will naturally take you to see the other altar masters of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. What Blue Wood said was actually very reasonable. After all, the Blood Cloak Pavilion was considered a large organization. The leaders of these organizations naturally wouldn't stay in such a remote place and wait for the descendant of the banishment sect to come to them. Therefore, Blue Wood's words could be trusted. Sorry, I'm being rude. Since Blue Wood Altar Master has already made a plan, then I will naturally wait for the other altar masters to come back and discuss many things. It's naturally best that you can understand. After saying that, Blue Wood Altar Master called the waiter who had just poured wine for Nangongzhe and Blue Wood Altar Master. Go and take Sir Nangong to a place to rest. The waiter nodded and went to Nangongzhe. He stretched out his hand and said respectfully, "Please come with me." Nangongzhe nodded and walked in the direction that the waiter was pointing at. He just took a deep look at Blue Wood Altar Master and left without saying anything. From the beginning to the end, Nangongzhe had never revealed his name. However, Blue Wood Altar Master directly called out Nangongzhe's surname, which was enough to prove that the Blood Cloak Pavilion actually had a certain amount of knowledge about him. Nangongzhe had participated in the Third Shinobi World War, and he had never hidden the Tribulation Sword in his hand. With the Tribulation Sword's outstanding appearance, it wasn't difficult for people to remember it. However, whether it was Blue Wood Altar Master or Blue Wood Altar Master, neither of them were that enthusiastic about Nangongzhe. They knew that Nangongzhe had their founder's Tribulation Sword, but they never tried to contact Nangongzhe. Looking at Nangongzhe's figure leaving, Blue Wood Altar Master sighed meaningfully. He then sat in front of the table, picked up the jade cup with the drunken immortal wine, and slowly drank alone. Sigh. Nangongzhe? It's not that easy to become the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I'm old, and I don't have that much ambition. But the rest? It's really hard to say. Chapter 154. Following the waiter, Nangongzhe arrived at a small courtyard not far from the wine shop. The small courtyard wasn't very big. It only had 2 small rooms and a slightly smaller courtyard. Sorry, the conditions here aren't very good. But we have people to clean it up every day, so please stay here for a few days. The waiter said to Nangongzhe embarrassedly. One had to know that Nangongzhe was a ninja. Even the weakest ninja's annual income was enough to cover 10 years of living expenses for an ordinary person. Very few ninjas would worry about money. Of course, ninjas also spent a lot of money. Whether it was herbs used to regulate the body, training, or ninja tools, the cost was still very high. Nangongzhe looked around, shook his head, and said to the waiter, "It's nothing. This place is much better than the place I lived in before I came to Woodleaf." Although it's a small room, isn't it also a good place? Although this place looked a bit too simple, whether it was the simple structure of the house, the bluestone tiles in the courtyard, or the few trees that weren't very big, the layout was very pleasant. After Nangongzhi came in, he also felt that it was more comfortable than the luxurious Changi Alley courtyard he lived in when he was investigating the wood leaf. It's great that you can understand. You must have spent a lot of time here, and your body must be a bit tired. I won't disturb you, have a good rest. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll inform you when the other altar masters come back. As the waiter said this, Nangongzhi also nodded. He signaled the waiter to go do his own things. Seeing the waiter close the courtyard door, Nangongzhi sat on the edge of a small stone table in the courtyard. One of his fingers tapped on the stone table from time to time. It seems that after these years, the blood cloth pavilion has begun to become less pure than when the banishment elders first established it. This is very normal, as long as the power of an organization is not bad. After losing their original founder who was strong enough to control everyone in the Asia server, they would inevitably have to face the adjustment and integration of their internal power. To find the best configuration that can allow the organization to continue. The banishment elders have left the ninja world for many years. The Blood Cloth Pavilion, as an organization, has not been divided and dissipated until now is already a very good thing. As the pride of the ninja world, the Woodleaf Village has only been established for a few decades, but the big and small power struggles have already begun to appear on the surface. If Sandame-sama wasn't such a person, coupled with the fact that the name of the Land of Fire gave Konoha some pressure, coupled with the fact that the shinobi world wars broke out from time to time over the years. Woodleaf, can they survive until now? Moreover, the current Konoha can be said to be under the control of the third Hokage with his own means to suppress a few restless organizations that want to emerge. Once the Sandame dies, Konoha will be in chaos. When the waiter arrived at the wine shop, he reported to the shopkeeper about the arrangement of the Nangongzhi, and was sent away by the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper walked to the depths of the wine shop, a small compartment usually used for rest. He gently turned a vase on the table, and a hidden door opened on the wall beside him with a series of mechanical sounds. He took out a small and delicate token from his pocket and placed it on a small table in the secret room. 4 screens appeared on the wall opposite the small table, which was still in darkness. On the 4 screens, there were different people. Aoki, you are here? A person wearing a yellow shirt with a simple and honest face said to Aoki. Hutu, and everyone must be waiting anxiously, right? Aoki still looked as amiable as ever as he spoke to the people on the screen. It's nothing, after all, none of us expected that the successor of the senpai would come to us at this time. A woman wearing an aqua green dress said. She looked about 24 or 25 years old. Bai Shui, what you're saying is wrong. After all, he's the famous Yama of Konoha, the king of Konoha. Once he joins us, it will undoubtedly improve the strength of our organization. Why do you look like you want to cry but have no tears? The person who spoke looked very heroic, and his short hair was mixed with a few strands of golden hair. Humph. If he knows what's good for him and wants to use his name, then so be it. However, if he really intends to interfere in the internal affairs of our Blood Garment Pavilion, then we really have to let him know that strength isn't everything. You still need to know your limits. His fiery red hair seemed to have given him a fiery temper as well. With just a few words, the other altar masters were instantly rendered speechless. They didn't know how to continue the conversation. That's right, the people here were the 5 altar lords of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Well. Bai Shui, Ruijin, Hutu, Akame, don't quarrel over such meaningless words. No matter what, the boy named Nangongzhi has come here. What we have to discuss is nothing more than the manner in which we are to treat him. Now, if we are not being overly passive, then it is meaningless to keep talking tough. After all, Aoki was the oldest person among them and could be regarded as the senior of the other altar lords, so they had to give him face. However, after they stopped talking, they began to fall into a long silence. Suddenly, a superior appeared above their heads, which was very difficult to deal with. Altar Lord Aoki, I wonder how strong Nangongzhe is now. After all, it has been 3 years since this person made a move in public, and now he is in a period of rapid growth, so his strength is naturally changing with each passing day. We have to have some understanding of his strength before we can make a judgment based on this information. The altar lord of Bai Shui altar, who was in charge of collecting information, asked Aoki, who was in contact with Nangongzhe, from the aspect she was in charge of. That's right, Nangongzhe had been in Woodleaf Village for 3 years, almost in seclusion, at the Ninja Academy. Previously, Danzo had kidnapped Nangongzhe's family and had a conflict with them within Root's sphere of influence. With Danzo's personality, he would naturally keep it a secret. As for the information of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, in fact, there was only information about Nangongzhe from 3 years ago. The information in Woodleaf Village was not so easy to obtain. Chapter 155. Nangongzhe's Strength. When Aoki heard Bai Shui's words, he began to recall the scene of him and Nangongzhe testing each other in the tavern. To be honest, I'm not sure what level Nangongzhe's strength is at. I don't think I've reached the peak of his strength yet. 3 years ago, Nangongzhe was already a jonin of the Woodleaf sect. When he used his full strength, he could even compete with some of the older jonins. The strength of the altar lords is about the same. We're all the stronger jonins. However, everyone's techniques are different, and so are their characteristics. Our Greenwood Altar's internal energy cultivation method is one of the more vigorous internal energy cultivation methods, but the combat strength is not very high. However, when I was testing Nangongzhe, the two of us were only using the most primitive internal energy to fight against each other. Even in the area I'm most proficient in, I don't think I can compete with him. That was because I had already used almost all of my strength, but Nangongzhe still looked relaxed. I can't see through him. Just as Aoki said, Aoki's combat strength might not be the strongest among the altar lords. However, when it came to internal strength, no one could compete with him. Although internal strength wasn't a direct reflection of one's combat strength, it was an important measure of one's combat strength. Did he achieve a huge breakthrough in strength? Altar Lord Rui Jin's beautiful eyebrows were slightly knitted together. After a moment of silence, Rui Jin made a guess that shocked even himself. Could it be that this young man has already merged his mind, technique, and body into one and broke through his limits to reach the Hotian stage? How many years has it been since someone broke through to the Xiantian stage? Although we're all half-step Xiantian, it's so close yet so far. How could such a young man break through to the Xiantian stage? The Deep Earth Altar Lord's square face was slightly distorted due to the shock. It looked a bit funny, but no one mocked Ho Tuesday. Although Rui Jin's guess seemed a bit ridiculous, it was the most reasonable explanation. The legendary innate, in fact, even Nangongzhe didn't know that he had already reached the Xiantian realm that countless internal cultivators dreamed of. Banishment, who had taught Nangongzhe for a long time, didn't pay much attention to the Xiantian realm. He didn't even talk to Nangongzhe about it. Innate? Not bad, not bad. If I have the chance, I must have a good contest with this Nangongzhe and see how powerful this so-called Xiantian is. On the contrary, Scarlet Flame wasn't frightened by the title of innate. Instead, he shouted excitedly. Almost all those who cultivated the Scarlet Flame Altar's cultivation method had such a fiery temper and a thirst for battle. I heard that, this Nangongzhe is also a good swordsman. At this moment, Rui Jin had already broken free from the shock of his own conjecture and began to feel a little excited. Among the 5 elements altars, Ho Tu, Rui Jin, and Scarlet Flame were in charge of fighting. Bai Shui was mainly responsible for spying, and Qing Mu was responsible for logistics. Among Ho Tu, Rui Jin, and Scarlet Flame, Ho Tu was responsible for defense, Rui Jin was responsible for charging, and Scarlet Flame was responsible for close combat. So, Rui Jin and Scarlet Flame's thirst for battle was understandable, wasn't it? You too. It's about the same. That person might even become our superior. Yet, you two cowards actually want to have a good fight with him? I don't know what you two are thinking. The only female in the group, Bai Shui, instantly gave Scarlet Flame and Rui Jin two cowards status cards. If it was an ordinary person, Rui Jin and Scarlet Flame wouldn't mind letting them see how these two cowards could teach them a lesson with their fists. But Bai Shui, who was wearing a light green robe, had a smile on her face at this moment. She clearly looked very beautiful, but through the screen, one could feel a hidden danger hidden in her beauty. The people who were investigating the matter weren't all good people. There were all kinds of cruel methods in the hands of this group of people. Sister Bai Shui, don't scare us. It's our fault, we didn't keep our mouths shut. Unexpectedly, the first one to admit defeat was actually the most powerful Scarlet Flame. This tall man's eyes were filled with fear of the past. Bai Shui. Had Scarlet Flame been traumatized? Rui Jin, who was shouting happily just now, also firmly closed his mouth at this moment. What a joke, to touch Bai Shui's bad luck at this time. Wasn't that just courting death? Rui Jin didn't want to sleep happily in the middle of the night, only to suddenly have a poisonous bug climb onto his bed, or a dagger pressed against his neck. Rui Jin fiercely shook his head, he didn't dare to think. Sister? Bai Shui looked at Scarlet Flame and repeated the way Scarlet Flame called her. In an instant, a chill swept through Scarlet Flame's body. Then, Big Sister? Big Sister? Big Sister? Big Sister? Bai Shui and Scarlet Flame could be considered to be at odds. This. Bai Shui. Scarlet Flame is still a child, you don't need to be so calculative with him. Let's talk business, let's talk business. Old man Jianghu could be considered to have gone against his conscience. Scarlet Flame, who was probably 2 meters tall when he stood up, was actually called a child by Jianghu. However, Scarlet Flame still didn't dare to refute, instead bowing his head and smiling. Jianghu. I'm wondering if we should let this Nangongja try to pass the trial that senior banishment left for us altar masters? Ho Tu suddenly said to Jianghu. That trial? Back then, the banishment didn't block all the altar masters' path to becoming the head. It also left a path for them. As long as they could pass the trial, then they could justifiably become the Blood Garment Pavilion's head. However, the Blood Garment Pavilion had been established for many years, yet no altar master had ever passed the trial and become the head. It seemed to be a path to the head, but an invisible barrier stood in the middle of the path, and no one could pass through it. We can try. If Nangongja passes, then everyone will be happy. Our Blood Garment Pavilion's strength is a level higher, and even if he doesn't pass, we have enough reason to make Nangongja give up. Reconsider. 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 Before Aoki could voice his opinion, the other 4 altar masters had already made their decisions. In that case, let him try. Chapter 156. Nangongja had asked himself countless times what a sword was to him. Senior Banishment had said that a sword was the second body of the wielder. They both possessed essence, energy, and spirit. These essence, energy, and spirit would gradually be nourished by the wielder's strength. In the end, it would form a will. When the wielder could completely merge this weak will with himself, the sword would no longer be a sword. Only the wielder would be left. Senior Banishment was a person with profound attainments in the way of the sword. Naturally, he had his own understanding and judgment of the way of the sword. Nangongja also felt that Senior Banishment was right. After all, this was a path of becoming one with the sword. If he really walked down this path, he could expect to become a legend like senior banishment. However, Nan Gongzhi always felt that this path was not suitable for him. Compared to senior banishment, who had no other desires other than the sword, Nan Gongzhi felt that there were too many things in his heart. There were too many things in Nan Gongzhi's heart. Nan Gongzhi simply couldn't abandon Nangong Ro, Shaoling Air, Zhenbai, these people who were extremely important to him. Nan Gongzhi could not accept the heartless path of the sword. When Nan Gongzhi was fighting with Danzhou, he had a breakthrough. He had seen through himself, but there were still too many things about the sword that he could not see through. A gentle breeze blew in the courtyard, blowing the hair on Nan Gongzhi's forehead. It also made Nan Gongzhi's head, which was a little swollen, feel slightly refreshed. Nan Gongzhi removed the calamity sword from his knees and stood up from his cross-legged position. Oh, a guest is here. After Nan Gongzhi had broken through to the Shadow Realm, which was the innate realm that the Five Elements Altar Master had mentioned, he had become more sensitive to many things. Just like now, the people outside were walking towards the small courtyard where Nan Gongzhi lived. Although it was steady and powerful, it still contained traces of the decline of qi and blood. Clearly, he was an old expert. In a place like this, only old man Qing Mu could meet this standard. Aoki stood at the door of Nan Gongzhi's courtyard and was about to knock on the door. Nan Gongzhi, who was standing in the courtyard, waved his hand. His internal energy gushed out and turned into a gentle but powerful wind. It directly opened the courtyard door. This, Elder Qing Mu knew that it was Nan Gongzhi's doing. When he entered the courtyard, he discovered that Nan Gongzhi was still about 30 feet away from the courtyard gate. This kind of inner strength, as well as the wooden door that was not damaged at all. This made old man Qing Mu feel that he had been cultivating for most of his life. I thought it was the servant who usually takes care of my daily life who came to inform me that the altar masters have returned. I didn't expect it to be you who came to inform me. Before Aoki said anything, Nan Gongzhi already knew the purpose of Aoki's visit. The only thing that could make Aoki come to Nan Gongzhi personally was that the altar masters had all returned. Ha ha ha. This makes me feel a little embarrassed. On the way here, I was thinking about how to organize the words to tell you these things, but I didn't expect you to reprimand me. Aoki said to Nan Gongzhi with a slight wry smile. It seems that, the remaining altar masters have already thought of a way to make things difficult for me. Otherwise, a sophisticated person like you wouldn't have to organize your words. Nan Gongzhi looked at Aoki's bitter face and naturally knew that he must have encountered some obstacles in taking over the position of the chief of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Why don't you wait until I've introduced the other altar masters of our Blood Garment Pavilion to you before I tell you everything? Qing Mu clearly didn't want to tell Nan Gongzhi about the five elemental altar lords' plan under such circumstances. He wanted to bring Nan Gongzhi to meet with the other altar lords first so that they could discuss the matter in a more formal manner. Of course. This is related to the selection of the highest leader of the Blood Garment Pavilion. It's only right that I meet the altar masters. Aoki, can you lead the way for me? Nan Gongzhi knew that this wasn't a good time to talk about this, so he turned around and picked up the tribulation sword that he had placed beside him. Then, he bowed slightly and signaled Aoki to lead the way. Of course. Please follow me. Aoki smiled and said to Nan Gongzhi. The two of them walked one after the other, but they didn't go in the direction of the tavern where they first met Aoki. Instead, they went away from the slightly densely populated town and walked towards the outskirts of a mountain. Slightly shabby, aged bluestone slabs paved a path that led to the top of the mountain. The path was surrounded by towering ancient trees, giving it a serene feeling. A pavilion that wasn't very big was built alone on the top of the mountain. The place where a plaque should have been hung was empty. Instead, after the door was opened, there was a robe hanging in the hall. The robe was made of white silk with dark patterns woven by skillful craftsmen. It was obviously expensive. Unfortunately, most of the robe was stained with blood. As time passed, the blood had turned into a dark red color that was almost black. If one sniffed it carefully, they would be able to smell a faint smell of blood. The Blood Garment Pavilion. So there really was such a robe? Aoki noticed that Nangongja had been looking at the robe hanging in the hall. Naturally, he knew that Nangongja was curious about it. Thus, he explained. This robe is where the name of the Blood Garment Pavilion comes from. This robe was originally white, but it was dyed red by the enemy's blood. Therefore, it has been hanging here and has become the symbol of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Nangongja looked at the robe and felt that the style of the robe was very familiar. He couldn't help but ask. This robe is Senior Banishments? Aoki nodded, obviously agreeing with Nangongja's guess. The people in the Blood Garment Pavilion are all descendants of clans that cultivate internal strength. However, the cultivation method of internal strength had declined in that era, and there were very few people who were particularly powerful. Many people targeted clans like us, which seemed to be rich, and wanted to annex us. However, our senior would rather die than submit. He had been fighting with those forces who wanted to annex us. However, his strength was still not comparable to those clans who wanted to annex us. He was almost at the end of his rope. At that moment, Senior Banishment made a move and saved the remaining forces. The white robe on his body was dyed red just like that. After driving away the enemy, Senior Banishment even helped us improve our cultivation method and formed the inheritance method of the 5 Elements altar. In order to express our gratitude for Senior Lija's kindness, we used this blood-red robe as our symbol. We established the Blood Garment Pavilion to guard Senior Banishment. Chapter 157. Senior Qingmu is right. This is the Blood Garment Pavilion's earliest stance. We were originally a group of pitiful people who were saved by our banishment seniors. We formed the Blood Garment Pavilion to repay their kindness. As soon as Qingmu finished speaking, several figures walked out from behind the screen in the hall. The one who spoke was an honest-looking man in a khaki robe. He was Ho-Tu, the altar lord of the 5 Elements altar and the Deep Earth altar. Ah! He's altar lord of the 5 Elements altar and the Deep Earth altar. Hearing Ho-Tu's words, Qingmu introduced Nangongja. Greetings, altar lord of the Deep Earth altar. Nangongja greeted Ho-Tu politely. Ho-Tu bowed to show his respect for Nangongja. These are the other altar lords of the 5 Elements altar. There's no need to introduce altar lord of the Deep Earth altar. The red-haired man is the altar lord of the Scarlet Flame altar of the Blood Garment Pavilion. The woman in the green robe is the altar lord of the Clear Water altar of the Blood Garment Pavilion. The one with black hair mixed with blonde hair is the altar lord of the Pristine Gold altar of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Qingmu introduced the people standing in front of Nangongja to Nangongja. Rui Jin and Bai Shui were fine. They bowed to Nangongja and greeted Nangongja. However, Qian seemed to be in a bad mood. He glanced at Nangongja and did nothing else. This altar master has quite the temper. Very good, Nangongja looked at Qian and smiled. This guy's brain is stupid. He doesn't understand the ways of the world at all. Little brother, please don't take it to heart and forgive this coward. Bai Shui came out and said to Nangongja. It could be said that she was trying to explain Scarlet Flame's attitude. Sister Bai Shui. Scarlet Flame seemed to want to say something, but when Bai Shui glared at him, he swallowed his words. However, he still glared at Nangongja fiercely. That's only natural. I'm not someone who's so calculative. Everyone has different temperaments and personalities, and right now, Brother Scarlet Flame and I still don't understand each other that well. It's understandable that he's not so cordial. Nangongja smiled elegantly, looking very gentlemanly. On the contrary, Scarlet Flame looked more like a child throwing a tantrum. Bai Shui looked deeply at Nangongzhe and couldn't help but raise his evaluation of Nangongzhe. These people were very clear about Scarlet Flame's temper, but none of them warned Scarlet Flame when they came out to meet Nangongzhe. Instead, he waited until Scarlet Flame started to throw a tantrum before coming out to help him. In fact, they also wanted to have a good understanding of Nangongzhe's temperament. Most of the information they collected was about combat strength. This kind of information on how to deal with people had to be tested by himself to be able to get a clear picture of it. Nangongzhe's performance naturally made them feel very appreciative. To become the leader of an organization, it's not as simple as having strength. Dealing with people is also an important factor. As a person who has been famous in the ninja world for a long time, Nangongzhe didn't have the slightest arrogance. Instead, he was very approachable. Even when Scarlet Flame treated him with such a disrespectful attitude, he didn't show any negative emotions. The words he said to Scarlet Flame before, in fact, could be regarded as half a beating and half a teasing. Nangongzhe-sama, I am also a swordsman. Naturally, I also know a little about the character of people like us, so I have something to say. Ruijin took a step forward, and Nangongzhe also saw the long sword on Ruijin's back. There are very few people who use swords in the ninja world, and now that Nangongzhe saw such a person, he naturally had a good impression of him. That's natural, fighting and scheming is really boring. I believe that Your Excellency already knows that our Blood Garment Pavilion has been developing for a very long time without a chief. Suddenly, because of the sword of the banishment senpai, a leader suddenly appeared on top of everyone's head, which really makes a lot of people feel unfair. After some discussion, we feel that Sir Nangongzhe still needs to pass a test to become the head. Only then can you become the head of our Blood Garment Pavilion legitimately. Ruijin's words were very straightforward, just like a sword, straight and not curved. But Nangongzhe didn't have a bad feeling in his heart. This was very good. He clearly put the problem and then set his own conditions. This kind of style of doing things, although it's not very skillful. But it's also very difficult to dislike. Of course I understand what you're talking about. After all, the most important thing for an organization is its internal stability and unity. If you don't care about letting me become the leader of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Whether it's my heart or the people who belong to the Blood Cloth Pavilion, it will be unfair. You can seriously want to solve this problem, and you have already come up with a solution. In fact, you have done enough. If you tell me the content of the trial, I am also willing to try your trial. Originally, Aoki and Hotu were worried that Nangongzhe would suddenly become violent and fall out with several people, but at this moment, they also nodded slightly at this moment. Having such a leader was not a bad thing. Sure enough. I still like people who practice swords like me. Ruijin also smiled. The trial you want to go through is called the Dragonization Path. It was set up by Senior Banishment so that after he passed away, a more talented person could become the leader of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Both the ordinary members of the Blood Cloth Pavilion and the 5 elemental altar masters can go through it. As long as you can pass the trial, you will be the rightful leader of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Even if you don't pass, you will gain a lot from it. It will be of great benefit to your future growth. The Dragonization Path. Nangongzhe could not help but think of a legend that Senior Banishment had once told him. The divine dragon that flew high in the sky was actually a carp that crossed the barrier of the Dragon's Gate. The so-called Dragonization Path seemed to be similar to this legend. In that case, I will naturally give it a try. When I received the Heavenly Calamity Sword from Senior Banishment, coming to the Blood Cloth Pavilion seems to have become a part of my responsibility. In fact, I feel very good that I have not been rejected by all of you. The Dragonization Path is right in front of me. If I don't try it, won't I be letting down Senior Banishment's kindness in teaching me? Nangongzhe's words caused the other altar masters to look at each other. How many years had it been since Senior Banishment had passed away? Kindness in teaching him? Receiving the Heavenly Calamity Sword? It was really puzzling, but since Nangongzhi had agreed to this proposal, they did not bother to discuss it further. The few of them did not dwell too much on this issue. After all, the path of dragonization was not so easy to traverse. Otherwise, how could the Blood Cloth Pavilion not have a leader for so many years? Chapter 158. Thank you for your understanding. We're ready to start the dragonization path. As long as you're ready, you can enter the dragonization path at any time. Jianghu said to Nangongzhi. I don't need any more time to prepare. I've been staying here all this time to recuperate my essence, energy, and spirit. Since you've already prepared everything about the dragonization path, let's not waste too much time. Let's go straight to the dragonization path. Nangongzhi knew that these altar masters definitely didn't gather here today. Since they've already prepared the dragonization path, he could just go straight in. Well, let me take you to the dragonization path. Ruijin walked to Nangongzhi's side and said to Nangongzhi. Thank you. Nangongzhi was quite polite to Ruijin. I hope you won't try too hard when you're on the dragonization path. There are very few people who practice the way of the sword in this world, and people with your strength are even more rare. I'm still looking forward to the day when I can have a long talk with you and comprehend the way of the sword together. In fact, Ruijin's words were very proud. Although the dragonization path was indeed very beneficial to practitioners, there must be dangers that couldn't be ignored at the same time. Hadn't opportunity and danger always been a pair of close sisters? Of course. I'm also looking forward to discussing the way of the sword with you, Ruijin. Nangongzhi didn't say anything about the dangers. He just talked about discussing the way of the sword with Ruijin. There was great confidence in his eyes. When the altar masters saw this, they couldn't help but shake their heads. The dragonization path. It wasn't something that could be passed just because one was strong. I wish you good luck in martial arts. Although the altar masters had a lot of doubts about Nangongzhi's ability to pass the dragonization path, they still followed the usual etiquette and sent their blessings to everyone who was going to pass the dragonization path. Please, Ruijin stretched out his hand and motioned for Nangongzhi to walk with him. Then, he walked into the interior of the loft first. Ho Tu, Qiyan, Bai Shui, and Jianghu followed behind Nangongzhi and walked towards the depths of the pavilion. Arriving at a wall painting with 9 dragons flying in the sky, Ruijin took out a pearl that was emitting a lustrous luster from his bosom. With a slight leap, he embedded the pearl in his hand into the mouth of the 5-clawed golden dragon that flew the highest and also the largest among the 9 dragons. Only a dragon with a dragon's pearl in its mouth was a true dragon. For a moment, the entire 9 dragons painted wall seemed to have been activated. The 9 divine dragons, which were originally just ordinary relief sculptures, seemed to have been given life at this moment. It actually began to move. The white clouds and divine dragons on the wall had already come to life. Nangongzhi could faintly hear the sound of thunder coming from the wall. A huge majestic aura was also emitted from the wall. It was as if the dragon swimming in it was a real dragon soaring in the 9 heavens. The aura was unparalleled. After all, the altar lords and Nangongzhi were very powerful internal energy cultivators. Although the aura was terrifying, they could still withstand it. The endless aura came in waves, passing through the bodies of the altar lords and Nangongzhi. An indescribable feeling of relaxation appeared in Nangongzhi's heart. The aura emitted from the wall painting was purifying the internal energy in Nangongzhi's body little by little. Looking at the altar lord standing next to him, he saw that they also had a comfortable expression on their faces. It was obvious that the aura from the wall painting was also purifying the impurities in their internal energy. This is the first stage of the dragonization path, the aura descending. It is used to test the basic strength of those who have been lost. Those who are not strong enough will be eliminated here. Of course, if you can endure it, there will naturally be benefits. This is the opportunity to purify the impurities in your internal energy. Ruijin explained to Nangongzhe. The trial had already begun here. Time passed by slowly. The aura emitted from the wall painting also began to weaken. Looking at the original 9 dragons flying in the sky painting, it had now changed its appearance. Among the dragons, there were 8 slightly smaller dragons that had their heads facing each other, forming the shape of a door arch. The largest 5-clawed golden dragon with a dragon ball in its mouth was entrenched in the door arch. It looked like a slightly twisted path. Was this the dragonization path that the altar lords were talking about? Please, 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 the altar masters all stretched out their hands, forming a palm shape and facing the path paved by the golden 5-clawed divine dragon that appeared in the 9 dragons painted wall. Nangongzhe cupped his hands and pressed his hand on the 9 dragon wall painting. A wave of ripples surged. Nangongzhe's hand entered the wall painting without any obstruction. I don't know if he can really pass this dragonization path. Looking at Nangongzhe's figure that had completely disappeared in front of the wall painting, Aoki whispered such a sentence. He didn't know if he was asking himself or someone else. Well, since Nangongzhe has entered the wall painting, let's wait here quietly. In that case, all we have to do is wait here quietly. If he can pass, then there is nothing wrong with letting him become the head of our blood garment pavilion. The altar lords were all people who had experienced the dragonization path. Everyone was clear about the dangers. Passing the dragonization path was a great test of a person's strength, potential, and luck. If Nangongzhe can really pass the dragonization path, then it's not incomprehensible to let such a person become the head of the blood cloth pavilion. Maybe, in the hands of Nangongzhe, the blood cloth pavilion can once again prosper and become another powerful force in the ninja world. Not everyone could peacefully be a member of a hidden force for the rest of their lives. Although they have powerful strength, they can only walk in the dark. This kind of life is not tolerable for everyone. Heaven's retribution sword. Banishment. Nangongzhe. It seems that it's time for the blood cloth pavilion to go to the ninja world. After all, Aoki was old, and he thought a little more than the young people. Nangongzhe was like a spark that ignited a fuse. Whether Nangongzhe can pass the dragonization path or not, Nangongzhe, who represented the ninja world, has already ignited the ambition of many people to enter the world. As long as the timing is right, a single spark will inevitably become a prairie fire. The comeback of the blood cloth pavilion is already an unstoppable thing. Chapter 159. Putting aside the thoughts of the altar masters outside of the painting, Nangongzhe was already shocked by everything in front of him to the point that he was in a trance. The wall painting in the attic of the blood clothing pavilion was very large. It was already 8 to 9 meters tall. The divine dragons depicted on it were also extremely imposing. It was enough to show the meticulous thoughts of the creator. However, even such a majestic 9-dragon wall painting could not compare to what Nangongzhe was seeing at this moment. Just like what he saw in the wall painting, Nangongzhe was standing on a path formed by a golden dragon crouching on the ground. The 8 dragons were facing each other, forming the arch of a door. However, the 9 divine dragons here were so huge. He looked at his feet. Just a scale on the golden dragon was about the same size as Nangongzhe's body. Most of the 8 divine dragons that formed the arch of a door were already hidden in the clouds. Only their huge dragon heads were displayed in front of Nangongzhe. Nangongzhe did not know if it was an illusion or something else, but Nangongzhe felt that the 8 divine dragons were staring at him. It made Nangongzhe feel uneasy for no reason. However, a cold feeling came from Nangongzhe's hand and directly went to Nangongzhe's brain. This caused Nangongzhe's slightly flustered expression to ease a little. Heaven's Calamity Sword. Nangongzhe raised his hand and looked at the Heaven's Calamity Sword in his hand. He murmured softly. I didn't expect this. I thought I was an experienced and knowledgeable person. However, looking at such a huge divine dragon in front of me, my mind was still taken away. I actually became a little scared. Fear was an instinct of every human. Perhaps some people were extremely calm, as if they would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them. But that was only because they hadn't reached the bottom line of their fear. When fear really struck, how many people could really calm down? Nangongzhi didn't know, but Nangongzhi at least knew that he wasn't that heartless and fearless. Then, why don't you let me try this so-called dragonization path? Just like that, Nangongzhi stepped forward and walked towards the path in front of him. Although the distance was far, it was nothing to Nangongzhi. It didn't take long for Nangongzhi to reach the first door arch that was formed by two green dragons. It was only when they arrived that they discovered that there was a transparent barrier above the arch formed by two azure dragons, preventing them from moving forward. The state of the thin film was very similar to the ripples on the wall that pulled Nangongzhi into this space when he entered the path of dragonization. Is this also a spatial jump ripple? Nangongzhi knew that this was the first test that he had to face. Since I'm already in front of it, let's go in. With one step, Nangongzhi had already entered the thin film of the azure dragon arch. An irresistible dizziness hit him. Although Nangongzhi tried his best to stay awake, he still fell into a deep sleep. Nangongzhi's body was like a branch drifting in the river. Under the guidance of an unknown force, Nangongzhi's body was slowly sinking. Ouch, bang! The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground and a cry of pain sounded at the same time. A huge cloud of dust rose from the grass-covered ground. It was Nangongzhi who had entered the first azure dragon arch. At this moment, his body was covered in dust. His black hair was also mixed with 2 strands of green grass. This trial. Can't it give people a reminder? When I entered the wall, nothing happened at all. But after entering the first arch, I was forced to fall asleep. It wasn't gentle at all. It just threw me to the ground. Should I say that this is indeed a trial created by senior banishment? Nangongzhi touched the bump on his head. He complained while tidying up his clothes. He also took the opportunity to remove a few strands of grass from his head. Thinking about the days he went through under senior banishment, Nangongzhi felt that this strength was definitely created by senior banishment. By the way, where is this? After complaining about senior banishment, Nangongzhi realized that he should properly investigate his surroundings. Seeing that there was a relatively tall tree beside him, Nangongzhi didn't say anything else and raised his inner force. He was prepared to climb up the tree to see what kind of place this trial was. After a short run-up, Nangongzhi had already run towards the trunk of the tree. If everything was normal, then Nangongzhi should be like those ninjas who learned how to attach chakra to their feet. He should climb up the tree steadily, and then look down from the top of the tree to see where he was. But things didn't go as planned. Nangongzhi just walked a few steps on the trunk, and he fell from the trunk. What's going on? Nangongzhi could clearly feel the majestic internal force in his body, but why couldn't he simply climb to the top of the tree like usual? Welcome. Trial taker. A slightly ethereal voice suddenly reverberated throughout the entire space. This voice, no matter how he looked at it, it sounded like the banishment senior who had tormented him a lot. I think, you've already noticed. Although your strength hasn't disappeared, you can't use it at all, right? This is the Azure Dragon Gates trial. You will lose the internal force that you rely on to survive. You can only rely on your body and the martial arts that you've bitterly trained to pass this trial. Look in front of you. Nangongzhi followed the voice and looked at the dense forest in front of him. In the sky, as soon as the banishment senior's voice fell, the dense forest seemed to come alive, and its tall body moved on its own. A path appeared in front of Nangongzhi. Pass through this path and obtain the Azure Dragon token at the end of the path. You will pass this Azure Dragon Gate. Young man. Don't be afraid of injury, don't be afraid of failure. Let's just keep going forward. Let your courage become your strongest strength. Let your little universe, let your soul burn. So, you just wanted to say, little universe? What is this? Even the power system is different. It's even weirder than letting someone who cultivates internal force appear in the ninja world who cultivates chakra. You'll be said to be messing around, Banishment Senior. Chapter 160. To be honest, looking at everything in front of him, Nangongzhi did not feel that he was in an illusory space used for training. The trees in front of him had a sense of vicissitudes of life on their surface. In the depths of the forest, the sound of insects and birds could be heard from time to time. Nangongzhi even saw rabbits, squirrels, and other animals quickly shuttling through the forest. The most unusual thing was probably the source of the light, right? The sun could not be seen in the sky, but the light still carried a gentle temperature from a direction. It passed through the gaps in the canopy, leaving mottled shadows on the ground. If possible, Nangongzhi simply wanted to have a good afternoon nap and enjoy the environment here. However, Nangongzhi could not do what he wanted to do as he pleased. The path of dragonization was an important part of his future development. Nangongzhi had to force himself to be alert and pass through the forest path that looked very ordinary, but was said to be the key to this level. This is really annoying. I hate these troublesome things the most. But for my sister, for Mashiro, for little Linger, I still have to continue. Nangongzhi shook his head and threw out some negative thoughts from his mind. There was no other way. This was something that he should do the most at this moment. Since he had to do it in his best state. Otherwise, not only would he be letting himself down, he would also be letting down the teachings of the Banishment Senior, who was both a teacher and a friend. Nangongzhi slowly pulled out the Heaven's Calamity sword from the scabbard in his hand. The quieter and more peaceful a place was, the easier it was to hide unpredictable dangers, right? Sha, Nangongzhi's shoes lightly stepped on the slightly soft soil on the forest path. The sound of shoes stepping on the soil clearly appeared in Nangongzhi's ears. Ha! Nangongzhi suddenly turned around. Although the Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand had lost the support of his internal energy, with Nangongzhi's strength and the speed of the sword, the sound of air being cut was still heard. Dong, at the same time, the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground was heard. Nangongzhi just now felt that there was movement behind him, so he attacked with his sword. The thing that was directly cut in half by Nangongzhi's sword was not a human. It was a kind of tree with a human shape. This was the so-called treant, right? From time to time, some green juice from the trent's treant. What is this thing? Treants have the ability to move? Nangongzhi looked at the treant on the ground and felt that it was very fresh. But before Nangongzhi could figure out what this treant was, he heard an old voice echoing in the forest. You're a treant. Nangongzhi heard an old voice echoing in the forest. Bold human. You dare to break into the trent's territory and even kill one of our members. Your crime is unforgivable. You will die to atone for your sins. Nangongzhi did not know who was talking, but the name, treant, drilled into Nangongzhi's ears. Treant, is it a kind of creature? Nangongzhi murmured slightly, but there was a trace of a smile on the corner of his mouth. It seems that the key for me to pass this level is these so-called treants. Very good. Since they are alive, it means that they can also die and be injured. A creature that can be injured or killed is not a serious threat. In fact, Nangongzhi initially thought that these treants were a new type of puppet. After all, Nangongzhi fought against the sand ninjas before. A puppet master who hides himself is really annoying. Since these treants are a kind of creature, it really saves a lot of trouble. I don't know who you are. My only purpose here is to take away a token. As long as you give me the token, we will naturally not offend you. But if you don't cooperate, then I don't mind having a good fight with you. Nangongzhi knew that the key to passing this level was actually to find the Azure Dragon token mentioned in the voice of the Banishment Senior. If it could save him some trouble, Nangongzhi was actually very happy. But even if Nangongzhi wanted to avoid trouble, the old Treant seemed to be angered by Nangongzhi. Human. If you can talk to us properly and complete some tasks we give you, we will naturally give you the Azure Dragon token. But you killed one of our people, and now you have such an unrepentant look. How can we give you the Azure Dragon token? Can I get the Azure Dragon token by completing the Trent's tasks? Seems like this is also a way to complete this level. But whether it was the voice of the Banishment Senior in the sky or the Altar Masters who sent him here, they did not mention this at all. Instead, the voice of the Banishment Senior in the sky seemed to be deliberately guiding Nangongzhi to go against the Treants. This is really troublesome. So there is actually such a convenient way? But it doesn't matter, I have been holding back a lot of resentment during this period. Whether it is being schemed against by the Three Generations and Danzo, or Mashiro's situation, they all make me feel uneasy. A good fight is not a bad thing. Nangongzhi's mood was indeed not very good recently, and he needed to vent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have slashed the Treant that appeared behind him in half without any explanation. Ha ha ha. Very good, human, it seems like you have no intention of repenting at all. Then be prepared to welcome the anger of our Treant clan. The old voice seemed to have been angered by Nangongzhi to the point of laughing. His voice clearly contained a monstrous fury. I have been crowned with the name Yama by the people of the shinobi world, so naturally, I am not an indecisive and kind Virgin Mary. I can tolerate those who I care about, but people like you, why should I restrain my temper? You have threatened me again and again, and even contemptuously called me a human. Then I'll let you have a good look at what kind of Azura techniques the humans you speak of have. Nangongzhi chuckled, and the sword light reflected on Nangongzhi's face. If people who are familiar with Nangongzhi came here, they will definitely find that Nangongzhi's state at the moment is very abnormal. When Nangongzhi stood in front of the wall, he still had a humble and polite appearance, but just after entering the first trial space, Nangongzhi's mood has become so hostile. Everything is revealing a strange feeling. Chapter 161. As soon as Nangongzhi finished speaking, the trees that were growing silently on both sides of the road began to shake violently. The trees had turned into Treants at this moment. There were even lines that resembled faces on their trunks. Those who offend the Treant tribe, those who offend the Treant tribe, those who offend the Treant tribe. The Treants stood up one by one and said the same words. Their voices grew louder and louder in a short period of time. In the end, there was even a feeling of heaven-shaking momentum. All the Treants woke up. They slowly changed their positions and formed a battle formation with an unknown purpose, but it was filled with an iron-blooded aura. They said the same word at the same time. Kill. In an instant, the earth trembled and the clouds scattered. Even with such a terrifying momentum, Nangongzhi, who was the most direct recipient of it, was not afraid at all. Instead, his heart was filled with the desire to have a good battle. Even though his internal energy could no longer be used, it seemed to have sensed his master's soaring fighting spirit at this moment. It quickly flowed through Nangongzhi's body. The Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand trembled slightly and let out a series of sword cries. It wanted to tell its master that as his sword, it was also excited. A black light quietly flashed across Nangongzhi's eyes. No one noticed it. Fight! Nangongzhi held the Calamity sword in his hand. He was like an army of thousands of men and horses as he rushed towards the battle formation formed by the Treants. The soaring fighting spirit seemed to be able to compete with the killing intent formed by an unknown number of Treants in an instant. Nangongzhi could not use the internal strength and sword qi in his body at this moment. He could only rely on his physical strength to wave the calamity sword in his hand again and again. However, even so, Nangongzhi's fighting strength was still very high. A rather tall treant swung its fist, which was made of branches, towards Nangongzhi. Just as Nangongzhi was about to dodge the punch, vines quickly grew out from the ground. The vines wrapped around Nangongzhi's legs, trying to immobilize Nangongzhi. The pain caused the vines to turn slightly iron-colored. Nangongzhi knew that this vine was not something that he could break free from in a short time. You want me to take this punch head-on? So what? Why can't I face him head-on? The black light that had flashed through Nangongzhi's eyes and disappeared in an instant reappeared in Nangongzhi's eyes. Although it was still a flash, if one were to observe carefully, it would not be difficult to notice that there were traces of black light remaining in Nangongzhi's eyes. Ha! Slash! Nangongzhi roared, and the veins on his neck even appeared to be bulging. It was enough to see that Nangongzhi had used all his strength. Dong! The fist made of branches collided with Nangongzhi's Heaven's Disaster Sword, and a wave of air was produced. Although the treant's fist was made of branches, its hardness was enough to compete with Nangongzhi's extremely sharp Heaven's Disaster Sword. When the two collided, Nangongzhi's Heaven's Disaster Sword only cut 2 inches deep into the treant's fist. Human. Prepare to die. The tall tree man seemed to feel that his punch shouldn't have only caused such a big effect, so he also shouted loudly. He added a bit of strength to his fist. Although Nangongzhi was also trying his best to resist the treant's attack, he did not have the support of his internal strength. It was not enough to rely on pure physical strength. Under the huge force, Nangongzhi was deeply smashed into the ground. A huge pit with a radius of almost 1 meter appeared. Nangongzhi, who was in the middle of the pit, was now in an extremely sorry state. His robe was now covered in dust, and Nangongzhi's face was scratched by some of the thorns and branches on the treant's fist. Ha ha ha. Human, do you know the power of the Treant clan? He saw Nangongzhi's sorry state. The tall Treant laughed loudly. The laughter entered Nangongzhi's ears without any hindrance, and an uncontrollable anger rose from Nangongzhi's heart. Hee hee, you weak human, what are you laughing at? Nangongzhi laughed for no reason, and the tall Treant was confused. He was obviously beaten up so badly, but he still laughed. This human was really strange. Nangongzhi did not answer the tall Treant's question, and only used his hand to tear off the vine that was wrapped around his leg. Under the effect of the tall Treant's strength, the originally tenacious vines that wrapped around Nangongzhi's body had already become tattered. Whoosh! Nangongzhi's figure suddenly disappeared. Although the tall Treant was curious about Nangongzhi's reaction, the disappearance of Nangongzhi's figure still made the tall Treant wary. Looking around, the tall Treant was obviously trying to find Nangongzhi's figure. Gotcha! A huge branch fell from the tall Treant's body, and the cut was neat, which proved that it was cut by a sharp weapon. And the only sharp weapon here was the Heaven's Disaster Sword in Nangongzhi's hand. Human. What's the point of dodging? If you have the ability, then fight me head-on. The Treant's voice was obviously filled with anger. Hee hee, it was still the same laughter, and it carried a kind of coldness that made one's heart turn cold as it echoed around. At the same time, the sound of a branch falling to the ground could be heard. Obviously, Nangongzhi had cut off another part of the tall Treant's body. Human. 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 The angry roar reverberated around the battlefield, but there was still no response. Only the sound of hee hee. And the sound of branches falling could be heard from time to time. With the passage of time, the branches on the Treant's body slowly decreased. In the end, all that was left of the Treant was a bare trunk. Human, after the Treant's branches were cut off, there was still a possibility of recovery. But once the most important trunk was cut off, the Trent's life would also end. Therefore, at this moment, the voice of the insufferably arrogant Ent was trembling slightly. This human could really understand its own life. Hee hee, it was still the same laughter, but this time, it was not the Trent's branches that were cut off, but the Trent's trunk. Now, it's the rest of your turn, Nangongzhi once again said something other than hee, and at the same time, he looked at the remaining Treants who were still in the battle formation. Chapter 162. The battle, or rather, it was one-sided. The massacre of an entire race by a single person continued. Nangongzhi had already stepped on countless Treants. Most of the Treants were directly cut in half by Nangongzhi's sword. There were also many Treants that were directly dismembered by Nangongzhi, just like the tall Treant at the beginning. A light green liquid flowed within the Trent's body and flowed on the ground. Unlike the taste of human blood, the Trent's juice had a faint sweet taste. This light green liquid was somewhat sticky and stuck to Nangongzhi's body. This made Nangongzhi frown. Obviously, he did not like this feeling. Bang! Nangongzhi's body shook. A burst of power erupted from his body and directly shook off the juice on his body. His clothes were once again clean. Nangongzhi slowly sheathed the Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand. The Treants were not completely wiped out. However, only a few of them were left. Seeing Nangongzhi walking towards them, the Treants screamed and fled in all directions. All of this, isn't it that simple? Since they don't want to cooperate, then I'll just kill them until they do. Follow orders? Carry out missions? Exchange for tokens? Boring. Boring. Nangongzhi chuckled and ignored the few Treants that had already run away. Didn't he already achieve his goal? After killing these Treants, he would then obtain the Azure Dragon token that symbolized passing the stage. Where's the old Treant who just called me a mere human? You should give me the token that I need. Otherwise, it's not like I can't kill the entire Treant race. Nangongzhi shouted. He wanted to call out the guy who seemed to be the leader of the Treants. However, only Nangongzhi's own voice could be heard in the empty forest that had lost the Ents. Ah, no, it was now a plain. Not coming out? Then I'll go find you myself. Nangongzhi chuckled as if he had discovered a fun game. He walked briskly into the depths of the forest. There was no feeling of fighting at all. It was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll in the park. However, it was different from Nangongzhi's brisk demeanor. Every time Nangongzhi's feet touched the ground, a black aura would merge with the ground where Nangongzhi stepped on. When the aura reached the soil, it spread like a seed. Then, the surrounding vitality was slowly devoured by the black gas released by Nangongzhi. It didn't matter if it was a small insect, grass, or shrubs. Even the birds in the sky had lost their lives at this moment. When the birds' bodies landed on the ground, they were already entangled by a black gas. In an instant, the flesh and blood on his body had been completely corroded. At this moment, Nangongzhi was like a messenger from hell. He had an invisible sickle, reaping the lives of the weak and insignificant people one by one. Human. Enough. The old voice sounded again. It was different from the previous disdain. It sounded angry as if it had been provoked. This time, the old voice was full of anger. It wasn't just because Nangongzhi had slaughtered most of the lives of the Ents. More importantly, Nangongzhi was now absorbing the vitality of the land. If the Ents died, they could continue to reproduce. If the land lost its vitality, no life could continue to survive. What Nangongzhi was doing now was the same as cutting off the vitality of all the Ents. Oh. Now you know how to be anxious. Unlike the previous times, the old voice was illusory. This time, the old voice had a direction. Nangongzhi immediately knew where the old voice came from. I don't know who it was. Just now, you were like a god, looking down at me from above. You want me to submit, to make me admit defeat, to make me listen to your arrangements? Now that you've seen my strength, you want me to stop? It would be great if everything in the world could be so cheap. Human, what do you want to do? When the old ant heard Nangongzhi's words, he couldn't help but feel panic in his heart. Although Nangongzhi's words were biased, it was indeed what he had done. At this moment, the old ant really couldn't figure out what Nangongzhi wanted to do. Hasn't my goal always been very simple? It's the Azure Dragon token in your hand. Nangongzhi laughed, as if he was mocking the ant's intelligence. However, he quickly changed the topic. This was my initial plan. But now, I don't want to do this anymore. Your life is also mine. The old ant didn't expect that Nangongzhi had his eyes on his life. The conversation didn't continue. Nangongzhi directly walked in the direction where the old ant's voice came from. As expected, there was a huge ancient tree here. Some semi-parasitic vines were wrapped around the ancient tree. There were also a few birds that had built their own small nests on the ancient tree. If Nangongzhi wasn't here, it would probably be a painting full of natural beauty, right? Human. My life is related to the survival of this space. Once I die, this trial space will cease to exist. Are you sure? You want to do this? A very human-like face appeared on the trunk of the ancient tree. It looked very calm. It didn't look like its life was in danger at all. Every ant here was almost a clone of the ancient tree. The roots of the ancient tree were also closely connected to this space. Once the ancient tree was defeated, it wasn't hard to imagine whether this space would continue to exist. Oh. That's a little troublesome. I wanted to give you a quick death. Wouldn't you not have to suffer so much if I just let you die? But you have to threaten me with the survival of this space. I'm going to be the master of the blood clothing pavilion in the future. Once the space disappears, it'll be a great sin. Although Nangongzhi's words sounded like he was reflecting on his actions, how could there be a hint of annoyance on his face? Instead, it was filled with a sense of evil. Before the ancient tree could react, Nangongzhi had already pressed his hand on the ancient tree's trunk. The black gas that had spread out from Nangongzhi's feet had now spread from Nangongzhi's hand to the ancient tree's body. Since I have to keep you alive, there's no other way. I can only make you wish you were dead. Nangongzhi smiled. His smile was so happy that it made the ancient tree's heart turn cold. Ah! 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 The ancient tree let out a violent cry. It was obvious that the black gas that Nangongzhi had injected into its body had taken effect. Human. Human. I'll give you a token, a token. Don't do this. No. A token engraved with an image of an azure dragon appeared in front of the ancient tree, emitting wisps of azure aura. It was obvious that the ancient tree wanted to use this token in exchange for Nangongzhi to stop torturing it. Nangongzhi picked up the token and looked at the struggling ancient tree. The vines on its body and the bird's nest had been shaken off. With a chuckle, a burst of intense light emitted from the token. Nangongzhi's figure instantly disappeared from this trial space. Only the ancient tree that had lived for an unknown number of years was left, still screaming in pain. Chapter 163. When Nangongzhi's figure appeared again, he was already on a path paved with golden dragons that were dazzling with an unparalleled presence. The azure dragon arch that Nangongzhi had entered was now behind Nangongzhi. Playing with the azure dragon token in his hand, Nangongzhi wanted to continue to the next arch, the water dragon arch formed by two blue dragons. However, his body stopped in a strange position. No matter how hard he tried, he could not take another step forward. Hee hee. Are you restless? Nangongzhi whispered softly, the black light in his eyes became brighter. With a cruel smile, Nangongzhi closed his eyes. What should have been a snow-white spiritual space was now filled with the color of blood and black. At some point in time, lava pools had appeared on the ground, emitting a heart-palpitating temperature. Who are you? Nangongzhi's body was wrapped in black chains, and he could not move at all. Opposite Nangongzhi, there was a person who looked exactly like Nangongzhi. The only difference was that Nangongzhi's eyes, which were not bound by the chains, were constantly emitting a black glow. Who am I? He. I am you. Can't you see? The black-eyed Nangongzhi stared at Nangongzhi, who was bound by chains, and said coldly. At the same time, he looked at his own clothes and the heaven's calamity sword that belonged to Nangongzhi. It was as if he was confirming that he was Nangongzhi. The treants just now were not just trees, they were living beings with thoughts and emotions. It was obvious that you could have reconciled through a proper communication, and the Azure Dragon token could have been obtained. However, you slaughtered the treants, and even after obtaining the Azure Dragon token, you still left a death aura in its body. You made it suffer a fate worse than death. You said you were me, but how could you be me? The more Nangongzhi spoke, the more intense his emotions became. At the end of his words, the anger in his eyes was about to burst out. However, the black-eyed Nangongzhi who was standing opposite Nangongzhi was not intimidated by Nangongzhi's anger. Instead, he was very happy to see Nangongzhi's anger. He even closed his eyes slightly, as if he wanted to listen to Nangongzhi's anger. He looked very comfortable. I am you, I am you. I did not lie to you. All of your negative emotions are my nourishment. The angrier you are, the sadder you are, and the more murderous you are. It can make me stronger and stronger. I am you, I am the one who was called Yama. Not the one who did nothing in the wood leaf, with a group of brats calling him teacher behind his back. Slaughter, blood, lamentation, these are all things that I desire, but you forcibly imprison me. Do you have to do something as simple as playing house? You can even let go of that bitch called Masahiro who betrayed you with a smile on her face? I was so angry, so unreconciled. But I couldn't do anything. When I reached this place, an indescribable power surged into my body. I can escape from your imprisonment. Since you can't satisfy me, then I will come out and devour you myself. You can continue to watch like this, continue to be angry and powerless. Feel what I felt at that time, feel what it was like to be imprisoned. Just like Black-Eyed Nangongzhi, Black-Eyed Nangongzhi was the integration of Nangongzhi's evil thoughts. It was the product of him giving up on killing and being killed all these years. It would be easier to understand the relationship between Black-Eyed Nangongzhi and Nangongzhi if the name was changed. Inner Demon. Black-Eyed Nangongzhi was Nangongzhi's inner demon. Only with the help of an unknown power, the inner demon escaped Nangongzhi's control and became even stronger, suppressing Nangongzhi's consciousness. I can imprison you once, I can imprison you a second time, a third time, or even forever. You can do whatever you want now, but that is only temporary. Evil cannot prevail over good, you will be imprisoned by me again. Nangongzhi looked at the inner demon who was laughing wildly in front of him and said. His eyes were no longer burning with anger like before. Instead, they were very calm. It was as if the inner demon's actions could not change Nangongzhi's state of mind. He. As expected of me, you immediately calmed down after hearing the source of my power? It doesn't matter, this is just a moment of calmness. You can know all the things I do outside, and I will make you angry and sad. I am you. I know everything that you cherish and everything that you want to protect, don't I? The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi and said very seriously. The figures of Mashiro, Little Linger, and his sister Nangongzhi suddenly appeared in front of Nangongzhi's eyes. They were all tortured by their inner demons, crying and shouting, as if they were begging him to become the original Nangongzhi who lived with them. You dare? Nangongzhi knew that these were all what the inner demon wanted him to see. However, Nangongzhi was still unable to suppress his emotions, and his face had become very ferocious. These two words were forcefully squeezed out from between his teeth. His anger could not be suppressed. See, didn't I say it already? I know you, I know what will make you angry. The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi's ferocious face, reached out and grabbed Nangongzhi's hair, and forced his face to Nangongzhi's face. The black light in his eyes became even brighter, and it was filled with a gloomy aura. Just stay here and watch quietly. After saying that, he turned around and disappeared into the spiritual space that had turned black and red. Only Nangongzhi was left, his body wrapped in chains, and his eyes were filled with anger as he stared fiercely in the direction where the inner demon disappeared. On the golden dragon, Nangongzhi opened his eyes. He. It feels good to occasionally tease that despicable self of mine. However, in order to become stronger, I need more anger, sadness, and a series of negative emotions. Nangongzhi raised his head and looked at the water dragon arch in front of him. Let's see what kind of trial it is. Let me make myself angrier. Chapter 164. The arch formed by the two watercolored dragons was right in front of him. Just like the arch formed by the azure dragon at the beginning, transparent ripples shrouded the hollow of the arch. This was the second trial, the entrance to the water dragon gate. Then, let's go. Unlike the first azure dragon gate arch, after entering the water dragon gate arch, Nangongzhi was not forced to fall asleep. On the contrary, Nangongzhi remained completely clear-headed. He finally had the chance to see what the passageway to the trial space that was similar to a space-time tunnel looked like. The tunnel was so deep and empty. Whether it was light or sound, they all lost their meaning of existence here. It was like a place abandoned by the world. There was nothing. A water-colored light suddenly rushed towards Nangongzhi from the horizon. The power was very gentle, but it was impossible to resist. He could only follow the light and fly towards a place. Light. A dazzling light appeared in front of Nangongzhi. A peach-pink aura suddenly appeared around Nangongzhi. This must be the water dragon's trial, right? Not bad. You must have noticed it after passing the first trial, the azure dragon gate, right? No matter how strong your inner strength is, your foundation is the most important. Even if you lose your inner strength, as long as you have the courage to fight and face danger, you will be able to survive. You will always be able to face any difficulties. The voice of the banishment senior sounded in the space as usual, with a hint of gratification and praise. It was as if he had seen his own junior achieve great things. Sure enough, it was already planned. The corner of Nangongzhi's mouth twitched slightly, and a somewhat mocking expression appeared on his face. In the first trial, he did not cooperate with the Ents like the banishment had planned. Instead, he slaughtered most of the Treant clansmen and even threatened the old Treant, who was the leader of the Treant clan. In the end, he left a death aura in the Elder Ent's body that was enough to torture the Elder Ent for the rest of his life. If it had been the senior Lizha that Nangongzhi knew, he would have slashed down with his sword upon seeing his actions. What kind of praise and approval do you want? He was thinking too much. This trial is the water dragon gate. Many people say that water is the most selfless thing, quietly nourishing all things. Anything that can be described as water is often praised by people. However, if I were to find something to relate to water, I would like to say that a person's desire is like water. It's seamless and unavoidable. It's so quiet that it erodes one's bones and soul. The water dragon gate was a door that allowed people to face their own desires. To overcome their desires, or fall. Everything depends on your own choice. As expected, it was the banishment senior's style. For all the definitions of predecessors and the public, they would always find such a slightly strange but exceptionally reasonable explanation. Water, is the existence of desire? A water-colored brilliance suddenly appeared around Nangongji's head, like a layer of gauze surrounding his head. Waves of cool feeling continuously entered Nangongji's brain from the outside world. Discovering desire depends on scanning a person's memory? But, this memory doesn't belong to me. I wonder what kind of trial of desire it will be. Nangongji murmured softly. That's right. Although his body was still Nangongji's body, it had already been controlled. However, the control was already in the hands of Nangongji's inner demon. Nangongji might not be able to see through Nangongji's desire, but it was nothing to the inner demon. It could be said that the difficulty of this trial was even lower than the first trial, the Green Dragon Gate. When the brilliance dissipated, Nangongji appeared in an ordinary courtyard. Whether it was the style of the building or the plants in the courtyard, it looked very similar to the place built by Mashiro in the Lion Clan's alternate dimension. Nangongji looked around, his eyes flickering with a black light. This is Nangongji's desire? It's really a simple desire. Originally, I was still thinking about how to give Nangongji the greatest emotional stimulation. Now, isn't an opportunity directly placed in front of me? The door of the courtyard was opened, and Nangongro was standing behind it. She looked at Nangongji, who was standing outside the door in a daze, and pursed her lips slightly. She walked up to Nangongji and lightly knocked on his head. Stupid brother, what are you doing? You're already at the door, but you're still standing outside like a fool. Although there was a hint of reproach in her tone, her actions were very gentle. It didn't sound like a reproach, but more like a spoiled child. Nangongji's mental space was still covered in black and red. However, Nangongji, who was wrapped in chains, called out his sister's nickname. That's right, Nangongji could actually sense everything that was happening in the outside world. This was done on purpose by Nangongji's inner demon. It had completely eroded Nangongji's mental space. In order to allow Nangongji to have more intense mental fluctuations, it deliberately allowed Nangongji to sense everything that was happening in the outside world. At this moment, Nangongro, who appeared in front of the inner demon, also appeared in front of Nangongji. It's just that Nangongji could only be like a bystander, he couldn't do anything, he could only watch his sister welcome the inner demon into the door. After that, Nangongji also saw Mashiro and Little Linger. These people seemed to have nothing to do with the shinobi world anymore, they just moved to this small house in the Lion Clan space and lived a simple and comfortable life. This may be Nangongji's greatest expectation for his future, for his life. Although it was a fantasy, a trial. But Nangongji still yearned for such a life. But the words of the inner demon still echoed in Nangongji's ears. The people I cherish the most. Make me angry, make me sad. Nangongji didn't know what the inner demon wanted to do. But he could still guess a little bit. Originally, the inner demon used his sister and his family to threaten him. If he wanted to make more anger and sadness in his heart, wasn't this the best opportunity for the inner demon to do so? That's how people are. Even if they know that everything in front of them is an illusion, they still regard it as reality. In this way, they are tested and tortured by the illusory reality. Just like Nangongji now. Chapter 165. Very good. Is everyone here? Nangongji, who was being controlled by his inner demon, looked at the three people in front of him. They were his sister Nangongro, Mashiro, who had been with him for a long time, and Little Linger, who he had watched grow up, and suddenly said such a strange sentence. Nangongji's face also showed an indescribable evil expression. Oni-san, what are you talking about? What do you mean everyone is here? Didn't we live here after the trouble in the shinobi world? Who else can be here besides us? Nangong-ro heard her brother's strange words, and she couldn't understand what her brother meant. So she asked. Ah. It's nothing, but since everyone is here, I have some questions to ask everyone. Nangongja smiled, but his smile made Mashiro, Little Linger, and Nangong-ro, who were beside him, feel a chill in their hearts. Oni-san. What are you doing? Why are you smiling so strangely? Nangong-ro couldn't help but ask. Hee, Nangongja smiled, and his body suddenly erupted with an extremely powerful aura. Unlike in the Azure Dragon Gate, Nangongja's internal force at this moment can exert its original effect. After all, the purpose of this stage was to allow the participants to face their own desires. Strength and whatnot were secondary. So his internal force wasn't forcibly sealed. Along with the release of his aura, there was also a huge force. Even Nangong-ro, who was the strongest among the three girls, couldn't match Nangongja's strength. The three girls who were closest to him fell to the ground with their butts under the influence of the huge force. Oni-san, Nangong-ro wanted to say something, but Nangongja stared fiercely. All the words that were about to come out of his mouth were forcibly swallowed back down. Noisy. Nangongja walked in front of Little Linger with a smile on his face. Little Linger, Nangongja gently called the youngest girl among the three girls, just like how he always called her. However, the coldness and indifference in his eyes frightened Little Linger. Little Linger, I didn't teach you anything. When someone calls your name, should you respond properly? Nangongja glanced at Little Linger, who was sitting on the ground, and spoke to Little Linger like a strict teacher. Then, he shouted fiercely. Answer me. Little Linger's eyes were instantly filled with tears. The terrified Little Linger could only stutter out. Nangong. Big brother, and that's a good girl. Big brother wants to ask Little Linger a question. Without waiting for Little Linger to respond, Nangongja continued, Little Linger, do you know how annoying you are? Annoying? The big brother that she had always relied on hated her. Little Linger's heart was instantly filled with such thoughts. Even the voice that was originally choked with sobs instantly stopped. She just stared blankly at Nangongja's face. That year, your grandfather, that old guy A Wang, saved my life. I also know that I have to repay the debt of saving my life. So even though I was a little unwilling, I still took you with me. All these years, I have taken care of you very seriously, right? You said that you wanted to be a ninja, so I painstakingly taught you. Even after you entered the school, you went to Kiba Ninja School and became a boring teacher. But what about you? That lousy talent, and an attitude of having nothing to do. When you were in the ninja school, if it weren't for me, the higher-ups of the ninja school would still let you stay in the school for my sake. When will you become a ninja? Even if you become a ninja, you still have a silly look. Have you ever thought about how embarrassing you have made me? Little Linger listened to her brother's words. The mist in her eyes suddenly turned into tears, and streaked across her slightly immature face. Is this the method that the demon came up with to torture Nangongja? In this way, the demon mercilessly broke the bond between Nangongja and his family. Oh. Even with this, there are still no fluctuations. Looks like Little Ling, isn't that important in my original body's heart. Feeling its own power, the heart demon found that the conversation with Ling, did not stimulate its own emotions as much as the original body. He was slightly disappointed, but it didn't affect him. He just looked at Mashiro and Nangong-ro, who were still suppressed by his power. These two were the ones who could really increase his power. Nangong-ro and Mashiro's dark history was not small at all. Without looking at Little Linger, Nangongja stood up. He walked in front of Mashiro. When he walked to Mashiro's side, Nangongja had already grabbed Mashiro's hair. He pulled Mashiro up, and the pain from his scalp made Mashiro cry out in pain. Mashiro? Kong? Nangongja called out Mashiro's code name in root, and his eyes were full of violence. You are the first person who betrayed me among my closest people. That gentle appearance of yours is really good at hiding your true intentions. But I am a cultivator who has inner strength, and my 5 senses are sharp. Do you think I don't know about your little tricks at home? Every day, you would write down your observation of me on a scroll. These things must have been in the hands of Root, right? How dare you? How dare you? I was worried about your life, so I didn't hesitate to fall out with Danzo. The prestige that Konoha had built up over the years went down the drain, and now it has reached the point where it is impossible to return to Konoha. But what about you? But when I rescued you, you stabbed me without any hesitation? Who gave you the courage, and who made you believe that I would forgive you? Mashiro looked at Nangongja, who was questioning him, and his eyes were wide open. He was also immersed in his own regret for betraying Nangongja. Tears flowed down his face, and he muttered, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, enough. In the mind of the demon, there was a sudden roar. You can't hold it in anymore? The demon looked at Nangongro, who was the last person he hadn't questioned. This person who was closest to Nangongja was the one who could trigger all the negative emotions in Nangongja's heart. These were just 2 appetizers before the main course, but it was enough to make his main body angry. How boring. Chapter 166. Nangongja's lips curled into a smile. In the end, his main body was still too simple and pure. Just by using words to provoke him, he had already become so angry. It was clearly just a pile of tears from the shadows of the people close to him. He had actually started to lose control of his emotions bit by bit. He hadn't even started the main act yet. Nangongja looked at his younger sister, who had been with him for almost all of his life. Who knew how many ups and downs, big and small, Nangongro. Nangongja. Nangongro. Nangong, looking at Nangongro, Nangongja called out their names. This so-called Nangong, is it really my surname? Or is this a surname that I don't know who forced it on me? Looking at her brother, Nangongro's eyes were wide open. It was obvious that she had been exposed to some facts that she didn't want to face. From the moment I had my memories, I already didn't have you. My dear younger sister calls me Nangongja. I also have the rich inner strength that you call our grandfather and passed on to me in order to protect our lives, as well as this heavenly tribulation sword of extraordinary origin. Do you know that when I was still unable to control the inner strength in my body? Every day at midnight, the inner strength in my body would go berserk. It would wander around my meridians without restraint. How much do you know about the pain of my meridians being torn apart? Our lives were very difficult. Every day, we ate the cheapest ingredients. Many times, we even had to rely on the help of our neighbors and Uncle Chimu from the blacksmith shop to survive. In order to let you, my younger sister, have a better life. I could only go to the small forest behind the house every day and rely on the true intent of the sword Dao that I felt from the tribulation sword to practice sword techniques. Practicing swordsmanship will stimulate the internal energy in my body. After midnight, it will make me suffer even more. Finally, I joined the Woodleaf Ninja village that I had always dreamed of. But what are ninjas? To put it nicely, they are a group of people who have great strength and stand at the top of the world. But to put it bluntly, aren't ninjas just killing machines controlled by money? For our life, so that you, my sister, can live a more stable life. I could only hold the heavenly calamity sword and walk on the edge of death time and time again. In order to keep you away from death, I had to think of a way to send you to the Kiba hospital with the lowest risk factor. Injured again and again, staining my hands with blood again and again. I'll tell myself that I'm fighting so hard for my sister. But you know what? As my strength increased, more and more scenes of our childhood appeared in my mind, which were different from what you said about us. In these images, I have my father, my mother, and my grandfather, but I don't see you. Presumably, the grandfather you speak of didn't think that one day, I would be able to cultivate to the point where my spiritual power could break through the seal he set, right? I saw it. My father, my mother, everything I knew, the place I grew up in, disappeared without a trace in the fire and massacre. I was tearfully stuffed into the cellar of my own home by my mother. What echoed in my ears were the last cries of the passing of life. The surrounding air was so hot, I knew that there was a raging fire around me. But I could only cover my mouth like this, not even daring to cry out. Finally, when all the sounds outside returned to silence. With my own hands, I dug away the dirt and ashes that covered the cellar door. I told myself again and again, I want to live. I want to live and find those who made me lose everything. I want to take revenge on them. Then, I lost consciousness. But I faintly saw two people, an old man and a little girl. Tell me, who are the two of them? Who was the one who covered up my memories? Who was the one who brought the baptism of war to my remote village that stood aloof from worldly affairs? Who was it? Who was it? I don't know how many times I thought about it, but in the end, I realized that it was the two of them. My closest sister, the girl called Nangong Ro, and the grandfather she spoke of. Nangongja looked at Nangong Ro, but his tone didn't fluctuate at all. Even though he was talking about his childhood memories that were covered up, his tone was still as cold as ever. It was as if he was talking about a story that had nothing to do with him, but the black light in his eyes was shining brighter. Actually, Nangongja had always known this. Since his strength increased day by day, more and more memory fragments would appear in Nangongja's mind through the seal. However, Nangongja had never mentioned it. In fact, Nangongja was very afraid. He was very afraid that his current life would no longer exist. Therefore, Nangongja chose to escape and chose to ignore all possible guesses. He only wanted to use the name Nangongja and continue living with his sister, Mashiro, and little Linger. These were the things that Nangongja was most unwilling to touch. Nangongja was very clear that the Nangong Ro, Mashiro, and little Linger in front of him were all illusions created by the trial. However, his inner demon's questions were also questions to Nangongja. These sharp questions were like sharp blades that were gouging Nangongja's heart. Nangongja had already lost control of his body. He could only watch as his sister, Mashiro, and little Linger sat in front of him. They were either crying, blaming themselves, or not saying a word. Inner demon. Inner demon. Inner demon. Get over here, get over here. Nangongja roared. Nangongja roared. However, the inner demon seemed to be unaware and had already slowly pulled out the Heaven's Calamity Sword. What did the inner demon want to do? The Heaven's Calamity Sword's edge was already on Nangong Ro's white neck. The slight friction caused the Heaven's Calamity Sword to leave a bloody mark on Nangong Ro's neck. Was this inner demon trying to kill his sister? No, it wasn't just his sister. There was also Mashiro and little Linger. The inner demon wouldn't let any of them go. Even if the Nangong Ro, Mashiro, and little Linger here were all illusions, Nangongja was still unwilling to watch them die. He had to do something. Chapter 167. Feeling his growing power, Nangongja knew that his original body was on the verge of collapse. And the method to completely destroy his original body was so simple. He only needed to gently swing his sword 3 times to end the 3 phantoms in front of him that couldn't even be considered as living beings. It was really too simple, wasn't it? To be tied down by these meaningless emotions, to let your sword be covered with rust by these useless people. Such a body is so useless that I can't stand it anymore. Since you're so useless, why don't you let me replace you? Whether it's the name of Yama or the sharpness of the Heaven's Calamity Sword, let me properly display their power. Nangongzhi raised the Heaven's Calamity Sword in his hand that had already been unsheathed. The blade's sharpness was getting closer and closer to Nangongzhi's neck. 3 inches, 2 inches, 1 inch, 1 inch. When the blade was about to touch Nangongzhi's neck, it stopped. Just a little bit more, and Nangongzhi's life would be gone. But at this moment, Nangongzhi's eyes no longer had the black light that was controlled by the inner demon, nor did they have the usual brilliance. Instead, they became very lifeless, as if his body no longer belonged to anyone. What are you doing? Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi, who was tightly bound by the black chains in front of him, and his face became very ferocious. Clearly, as long as he waved his sword, he could take away Nangongzhi's life. Let his original body completely collapse, let him completely control Nangongzhi's body. But the inner demon was once again pulled back into the spiritual space by an incomprehensible force. Clearly, I've already completely controlled the body, and you've been suppressed by me to such a state. How did you pull me into this space? Nangongzhi should be at a disadvantage right now. Whether it was the black chains on his body or the completely changed color of his spiritual space, they all proved that Nangongzhi was at a disadvantage. However, Nangongzhi had a gentle smile on his face, as if everything was not that bad. Indeed, you are very powerful. You've used your power to completely control my physical body and spiritual space. Nangongzhi raised his head and looked at the ferocious face of his inner demon. Everything you've said, everything you've done, is known to me. These were all things I didn't want to talk about, because once the truth was revealed, I wouldn't say it out loud. Then everything I love and cherish will cease to exist. Even though the one outside is an illusion of my sister, Mashiro, and little Linger, I'm not sure if it's real or not. But their emotions, their memories, and their thoughts are all girls that I love and cherish. It's you who made me see the price I have to pay after revealing the truth. You must have felt my mixed feelings of anger, sadness, and powerlessness at that time, right? But these feelings are not because of those 3 girls, but because of my anger, sadness, and powerlessness. It's because I'm not strong enough. It's because I let you take control of my body. It's all because I'm too weak. When the inner demon heard Nangongzhi's words and realized that his original body was blaming himself, the expression on his face was extremely rich. He was the one who did all these things. His original body's sadness, anger, and powerlessness were the most exquisite metals that should belong to him. But now, his original body was telling him that these did not belong to him? What a joke! Ah, it's indeed your fault. You cared about these meaningless things. You gave little Linger tolerance, gave Mashiro forgiveness, and gave Nangongzhi love. These things have made you so weak. These things made you fall into your current situation. Where's the viciousness you had when you killed people? Where's the wit you had when you and those ninjas schemed against each other? Where's the aura you had when you were called Yama? Just because of these 3 women, you've become so weak. You became a weak existence that only knows how to blame yourself and feel sorry for yourself. Since you can't be Yama, you're not worthy of this Heaven's Calamity Sword. Why don't you let me replace you and become the Yama that should have made everyone tremble? Nangongzhi had not yet become agitated, but the inner demon was already speaking more and more passionately. You're right. I don't have the viciousness I had in the past. I don't have the mood to scheme against each other, and I don't have the aura to directly take the lives of those who stand in my way. But, did this really make me weaker? No, it's the opposite. I feel that after I threw away these things, I've truly become who I should be. After I took in little Linger, I gained innocence. After I forgave Mashiro, I gained freedom. When I saw Ruru as my family, I gained the meaning of life. These things were never meaningless trash. To me, these are the meaning of my battle. The more Nangongja spoke, the more resolute his heart became. What was an inner demon? It was a hole in one's heart. Everyone would more or less have an inner demon. It was just that Nangongja's inner demon, for unknown reasons, suddenly escaped from Nangongja's control. The inner demon also knew that it had to directly cause its original body to collapse in order to truly become an independent entity. This was why it repeatedly challenged Nangongja's bottom line in these two trials. But now, Nangongja seemed to have seen through its confusion and actually began to slowly gain control of the spiritual space. Ah. 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 You're just one of my prisoners now. What's the point of saying so many righteous words? I'll let you have a good look at my power. The inner demon's agitation also caused a change in the spiritual space. The sky and the surrounding areas covered in blood and black began to emit a black and red light. The magma pools on the ground also began to boil. It pulled out the calamity sword in its hand, as if it wanted to slash at Nangongja. Nangongja raised his head and looked at the inner demon in front of him, who had already gone mad and turned into a demon. Its eyes were filled with disdain and ridicule, as if it was looking at its disobedient poodle. Whose sword do you think you're holding in your hand? Chapter 168. When the inner demon heard Nangongja's words, he didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the heaven's calamity sword in his hand. Doesn't it belong to whoever has the sword? The heaven's calamity sword is indeed very intelligent, but in the end, it's still a sword. Do you think it can run to the hands of the owner who let it collect dust? If the heaven's calamity sword really does have a consciousness, it will definitely choose me to be its owner. When he heard the inner demon's confident words, Nangongja's smile became even wider. You shouldn't be making your own assumptions about who it will choose. Isn't it better to let the heaven's calamity sword choose? Let the heaven's calamity sword choose? Just based on. The inner demon was just about to mock his main body for looking at a sword as if it was a person. But at this moment, the heaven's calamity sword in the inner demon's hand began to tremble slightly. The sword's cries echoed in the surroundings, as if it had really come to life. Look, the heaven's calamity sword can still make its own choice, right? Nangongja looked at the inner demon, as if he was sure he would win. However, the inner demon wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. Whether it was in terms of IQ or EQ, the inner demon and Nangongja were almost the same. The heaven's calamity sword definitely wouldn't have its own consciousness. In this world, there had never been any item that had the ability to think for itself. Then, what caused the heaven's calamity sword to act so strangely? One had to know that he was in a spiritual space that was already under his control. All illusion tricks had nowhere to hide in front of him. Wait, spiritual space? Could it be that you? Impossible, impossible. This spiritual space is completely under my control. With your current state, how can you break free from my restraints and regain control of this spiritual space? The inner demon still spoke his conjecture. Although the inner demon didn't want to believe it, this was already the most likely answer he knew. Looking at the black chains wrapped around Nangongja's body, these chains evolved from a part of the inner demon's power. All of Nangongja's movements would be transmitted to his consciousness through the chains. He clearly didn't feel anything, so Nangongja couldn't break free from the chain's restraints. You and I are of the same origin. Although you've inexplicably received an unknown power, you're still a part of me. These chains. Nangongja looked at the chains wrapped around his body, and slowly began to stand up from his originally paralyzed state. An icy blue light suddenly burst out from Nangongja's body, and began to attack the chain's restraints. The inner demon trusted the black chains very much, but in an instant, the light from Nangongja's body pierced through them. The chains were clearly very sturdy, but they were like paper. As soon as Nangongzhi raised his arm, they were broken. At the same time, the entire spiritual space began to drizzle. The drizzle was very small, but very dense. It even had a similar color to the light from Nangongzhi's body. When the drizzle touched the black and red that covered the entire spiritual space, the black and red were instantly washed away. The lava pools on the ground were also extinguished by the drizzle. I don't accept this. I don't accept this. I don't accept this. What I did was what you thought deep in your heart. I only did what you didn't dare to do normally according to your wishes. Why should I lose to a hypocrite like you? If you didn't have any dark thoughts, if you didn't have a trace of evil, if you didn't have any evil intentions, I wouldn't exist. You would never, never be able to destroy me. Because I am you. Unless you die, I will never be banished. The inner demon was also in the drizzle. Every drizzle that touched the inner demon's body caused wisps of smoke to rise from his body. It was like the smoke from a fire that was poured with water. The inner demon couldn't withstand such power. He wailed, he roared, he scolded his original body for being hypocritical and his own greatness. Dark thoughts? Evil thoughts? I've never denied these things. Just like what you said, these things are a part of me since I was born. As long as I'm alive, these thoughts will continue to appear. They can't be killed, and they can't be destroyed. So, I choose to accept them. I don't think I'm a person filled with kindness. I only forgive people that I'm willing to forgive. Kill people? Torture people? It's not like I haven't done it before. The inner demon looked at the original body standing in front of him, who looked exactly like him, and said these words softly. You want to assimilate me? Yes, the inner demon knew that this was the purpose of his original body. He wanted to merge his kindness and evil thoughts again, instead of suppressing his evil thoughts like in the past. I don't want to. It wasn't easy for me to escape from your control and have my own independent thoughts and consciousness. Now, you want me to merge with you again by saying that you're willing to tolerate me? I refuse. I refuse. Nangongzhi looked at the incarnation of his evil thoughts, the inner demon. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. After all, the inner demon was created by himself. The so-called mysterious external force was actually just to advance the growth of the inner demon. He had to face this problem in the end. Nangongzhi waved his hand, and the catastrophe sword in the inner demon's hand was already in Nangongzhi's hand. He waved the long sword in his hand, and his mental strength was also mobilized along with the long sword. Shwa! 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 There were 4 consecutive sounds of the air being cut through, and 4 invisible barriers rose in the spiritual space that had returned to its original white and flawless appearance, imprisoning the inner demon. Nangongzhi took a deep look at his inner demon. He opened his mouth several times, but didn't know what to say. He could only silently shake his head, turn around, and leave the spiritual space. He regained control of his body. Looking at Mashiro, Nangongro, and Little Linger, who were in a daze in front of him. Even Nangongzhi didn't know what to say, although they were all illusions formed by this trial space. However, everything seemed so real. Ruru, Mashiro, Little Linger, Nangongzhi gently called the names of the 3 girls, but the 3 girls were in a daze and didn't respond at all. He could only gently wave his sleeves, and a burst of mental strength instantly gushed out, directly bursting the illusion formed by the trial space. This was the improvement Nangongzhi had obtained after the crisis of the heart demon. Everything around him returned to its original state. It was a deep and empty space. Only a token carved with exquisite dragon patterns and surrounded by water aura was floating in front of Nangongzhi. Chapter 169. Nangongzhi once again stood on the back of the golden dragon. Unlike before, when his inner demon seized control of his body, Nangongzhi had completely returned to his original appearance. This time, what appeared in front of Nangongzhi was a door arch formed by two crimson dragons. Without hesitation, Nangongzhi took a step into the cave. Perhaps it was because of his previous experience. Nangongzhi only wanted to pass through these levels as soon as possible. Then, he would return to the Lion Clan's alternate space and take a good look at Nangong-ro, Mashiro, and Little Linger. After this thought appeared in Nangongzhi's mind, it could not be dispersed. Congratulations, you have reached the 3rd level. You have seen through the things you are obsessed with. No matter if it's your soul or your body, both have reached an indescribable level of improvement. We live in this world, we will experience all kinds of things and meet all kinds of people. We will be happy, but we will also be hurt. You have the skills and temperament. Can you bear the pain? I am very curious. This crimson dragon door is to test how much pain you can endure. In front of you, there is a path. It is filled with flames that can burn both the body and the soul. No matter how far you can go, you will obtain the Crimson Dragon token. All of this is related to your choice. Senior Lija's voice rang out as usual, explaining the stages to everyone who challenged him. No matter how far I can go, I will obtain the token for this level? Nangongzhi did not think too much and directly stepped on the path in front of him, which was burning with golden flames for some reason. When his first step landed, he felt a burning sensation on the bottom of his feet. But that was it. With Nangongzhi's willpower, he was able to endure the pain. Second step, third step, with every step, the burning sensation Nangongzhi endured became more and more intense. The air around him became hotter and hotter, and waves of pain came from his head. Was this the soul-burning flame that Banishment Senior mentioned? Countless flames rose up, like a dancer who had not danced for a long time and heard his favorite music. It constantly jumped and swayed. Nangongzhi did not have too many distracting thoughts. He just walked forward step by step. A flame suddenly rose up and touched Nangongzhi's robe. Nangongzhi's consciousness was a little blurred at this moment. He did not notice that his robe was on fire. Robe was made of ordinary materials, it was unavoidable that it started to burn. After a while, his robe was burned, it was a beggar's robe. Nangongzhi's skin began to be exposed under the threat of the flames. His skin began to turn black. If he sniffed carefully, he might even be able to smell the pungent smell of burnt flesh. Time gradually passed, and the flames around Nangongzhi began to burn higher and higher. Nangongzhi was now almost drowned in the flames. Besides the pain, Nangongzhi could not feel anything. He just walked forward like a machine. Suddenly, a sentence appeared in Nangongzhi's mind. No matter how far you can go, you will receive the Scarlet Dragon token. No matter how far I can go, I will receive the token. That's right. Banishment's words appeared in Nangongzhi's mind again. Was it enough? Was it enough for him to reach this point? He was really in pain. His mental power and physical strength were at their weakest. There were 5 levels here, and he had only passed the 3rd one. There were 2 more levels that were more difficult than this one waiting for him. Should he give up? Should he give up so that he could have a higher chance of passing the remaining levels? Anyway, he had already come so far. He could definitely get the token for this level. Why should he not give up? His goal was to pass the levels and become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion. He did not have to pass these levels perfectly. Why should he not give up? Give up, it was enough for now, he could definitely get the token. Why should he suffer like this? However, even if Nangongzhi was hesitating, his footsteps never stopped. It was as if there was a voice in his heart telling him that he should never give up. The original scarlet flames with a little bit of gold had turned into a completely golden flame. The heavenly calamity sword in his hand had also lost its usual coolness. It was now burning hot from the flames. Sword? A swordsman would rather break than bend. The sword is the courage of the person who wields it. As long as you still hold the sword in your hand, as long as you still have your sword in your heart, you should face all dangers. Then, you should be brave enough to face all dangers. Our lives are destined to be filled with thorns. Some people rely on their wisdom, and some rely on tricks to get through the dangers. However, your sword will tell you that you don't need to use such methods. The sword in your hand is the best way to face everything. These words were so righteous that it was impossible to refute. It sounded so good, but did it really have any practical meaning? However, who was the one who said these words? It seemed to be the senior from the banishment who had already started persuading people to give up at the beginning of the level. Misdirection? Nangongzhi vaguely guessed the meaning of the banishment's words at the beginning of the level. What test the pain, what could be given up? It was all nonsense. If he really gave up, it would be impossible to pass this level. This level was supposed to test whether a person's heart was firm or not. Go. I must walk to the end. Even if I can't pass the remaining 2 levels, even if I may not be able to become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Nangongzhi still wanted to pass the level. These flames were, in fact, the best companion for tempering one's temperament. If he could really persevere to the end, then the problem of the heart demon would be much easier to solve. Whether it was the Blood Garment Pavilion or the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion. The most important thing was to improve his own strength. Raging fire to forge true gold. This was the key to the Scarlet Dragon door. Nangongzhi continued to move forward, even if his feet no longer listened to him. He would use his own hands to crawl forward bit by bit. Even if his hands could no longer exert any strength, he would use his own body to move forward bit by bit. Chapter 170. At this moment, Nangongzhi had already lost consciousness. Just how far had he walked on this burning path? Nangongzhi didn't know at all. In fact, if there was another bystander, it wouldn't be difficult to see that this so-called straight path of flames was actually in the shape of a circle. It was just that because of the cover of the flames and the misdirection of the trial, it made people think that it was actually a straight path. It was a path with no end, and it could only keep going in circles. A token with a fiery red halo floated in front of Nangongzhi's forehead. Although the light was very weak, it covered the surrounding golden flames. A brilliance surged from the token, and instantly spread to Nangongzhi's entire body. Nangongzhi's body, along with the brilliance, turned into a stream of light and was teleported out of the trial space. Nangongzhi was lying on the back of the golden dragon. A gust of wind that came out of nowhere brushed past Nangongzhi's ear. It woke Nangongzhi up. Ever since I entered this trial, I've been in a coma. If I didn't know that I was the only one in this trial space, would really be worried about my own safety. With a bitter smile on his face, Nangongzhi made fun of himself. After checking his body, Nangongzhi found that no matter if it was his robe or his skin, there were no traces of being burned by the flames on the path of the Scarlet Dragon Gate. Although he couldn't figure out what was going on, Nangongzhi was no longer in the mood to think about his clothes. This was because Nangongzhi was holding the Crimson Dragon token that was burning in his hand at the moment. Azure Dragon. Water Dragon. Scarlet Dragon. These things belong to wood, water, and fire of the 5 elements. If I'm not mistaken, this earthen yellow dragon in front of me represents the power of earth, one of the 5 elements, right? But there are only 4 arches here. Where did the remaining metal element trial come from? Nangongzhi took out the 3 tokens that he had already obtained, and began to slowly think about the problem of this trial space. After all, there was a checkpoint in front of him that he needed to break through. It wouldn't be too late to say these words after he had passed through the Earth Dragon Gate Arch, right? The two earth-colored dragons faced each other and looked down with their big eyes. Nangongzhi stepped into the archway. Unlike before, when Nangongzhi arrived at a place similar to a spatial crevice, when he stepped into the arch of the Earth Dragon Gate, he had already arrived at the real trial space. This should be a cave. The air was slightly damp and musty. It seemed that the ventilation wasn't that good. Inside the walls of the cave, there were oil lamps that were ignited by an unknown source. Although the light wasn't that bright, it was still enough to illuminate the dark cave. This is, Nangongzhi stretched out his hand to touch the wall that was relatively close to him. A trace of moist and cool feeling came from his fingers. The first trial started with battle. The second trial was to break through obsession. The third trial was to walk through fire. It's really tough. The voice of the senior banishment came again. However, Nangongzhi felt that the senior's voice was starting to become weaker with every banishment. In the first trial, the senior spoke like an observer and judge. But now, the tone of his voice had a bit of annoyance. It was like a person reading a script. At the beginning, he felt that he was very good at what he said, so he read it very seriously. But the more he read, the more he found that the words he said were the same, so he didn't want to read anymore. I say. Senior banishment, you really didn't come up with these words, right? If it was the senior banishment that he was familiar with, if he were to say these words, the senior banishment would have torn the script to pieces the moment it reached his hands. Then, he would say, reading this kind of thing, I might as well go drink to my heart's content, and disappear. Sure enough, when the senior banishment helped the blood clothing pavilion build this trial space, he was still young. He hadn't had time to awaken his strange attribute yet. These words are really boring. Okay. Trial taker, follow the passage and you will find a picture. I drew it myself. As long as you can understand the things within the stipulated time, you will be able to pass this earthen dragon trial. As expected. His nature was exposed, right? Exposed, right? When Nangongzhi heard the senior banishment's lazy voice, for the first time, he felt that the senior banishment he knew was really the person he knew. Picture? I wonder what kind of painting Senior Xianxia will be able to draw with his own hands. Thinking about it, he was even a little bit interested. Nangongzhi walked all the way into the cave. At first, Nangongzhi was still on guard against any traps or beasts that would suddenly appear along the way to prevent him from reaching the depths of the cave. But after walking for a long time, he found that there were no abnormalities. Nangongzhi put the Heaven's Calamity sword back into his scabbard. The first few checkpoints were indeed not easy to pass. With Nangongzhi's temperament and strength, it was very difficult for him to pass. This also proved that Senior Xianxia had put in a lot of effort in designing these trials. But now, there were no obstacles at all in this stage. This was not a good thing. This proved that the senior banishment had great confidence in the picture he left behind. He was confident that it was enough to surpass the difficulty of the first 3 stages. Losing inner strength, being trapped, and burning the soul and body were all not as difficult as this picture. What's inside? Nangongzhi fiddled with his mouth. He was also thinking about what kind of picture the senior banishment had left behind. With the senior banishment's temperament, he probably would not seriously learn how to draw. Naturally, he did not want people to understand the creative ideas behind the picture scroll. What was the senior banishment's best at? Alcohol tolerance? Or the way of the sword? If he was not wrong, it should be something related to the sword. Then, what was inside the picture? Sword moves? Sword intent? No matter what it was, since the senior banishment was confident that it could stump the participants who had reached this stage, it must be very difficult. Whether it's sword moves or sword intent, let me take a good look. The Senior Banishment's Gift to the Blood Robe Pavilion. Chapter 171. Speaking of which, the crypt wasn't very long. After a while, Nangongzhi had reached the deepest part of the crypt. There was a small space in the depths of the crypt. There was only a stone table and a stone stool. A scroll painting was placed on the stone table. This. Compared to the previous 3 levels, this is a little shabby. Compared to the previous 3 levels, which had huge forests, realistic illusions, and endless paths covered in flames, the simple crypt space here was very shabby and rustic. Nangongzhi's gaze drifted to the scroll painting on the stone table. This must be the painting that Senior Banishment mentioned, right? He walked step by step to the side of the stone table and sat down on the stone stool. Nangongzhi reached out and held the scroll painting in his hand. A different aura escaped from the scroll painting, bringing with it an iron-blooded and murderous aura as it charged towards Nangongzhi. Sure enough, the scroll painting left behind by Senior Banishment wasn't something ordinary. Nangongzhi unfolded the scroll painting in his hand. The aura of iron and blood and murderous aura was finally released and rushed towards him. This so-called painting wasn't really a painting. It was just a simple ink mark, as if it was casually waved by a person. Is this the painting that Senior Banishment mentioned? It's really simple. Nangongzhi slightly ridiculed the banishment painting and looked at the ink mark. However, he didn't feel anything at all. It was just like a simple painting. Just as Nangongzhi looked at the ink mark, a decaying aura was constantly emitted from the bottom of the scroll painting. The pure white paper quickly turned yellow under the influence of the decaying aura, then slowly turned dark brown. It was as if it had been weathered for a long time and was even slowly decomposing. Is this the so-called time limit? Either I can comprehend the true meaning of this ink mark in time, or the scroll painting will directly decay and disappear. And then fail the challenge? Nangongzhi finally understood how the time limit mentioned by the Senior Banishment was achieved. He tried to inject his internal energy into the scroll, but the scroll didn't react at all. It was just like an ordinary scroll. Not inner force? Nangongzhi murmured to himself. Since it was impossible to discover the secrets within the scroll with the naked eye, there must be some sort of key that would allow people to discover the secrets within the scroll. Inner force or spiritual force? He then tried to attach his mental power to the scroll. The gentle mental power quickly permeated into every tiny structure of the scroll. There was still no reaction. By the time Nangongzhi tested the 2 powers, a third of the scroll had already been corroded by the decaying aura. There were also many places that had already dissipated. Banishment. Tribulation Sword. Sword. Sword Chi. Nangongzhi thought hard for a long time, but he seemed to have forgotten the most important thing. That was the sword that the Senior Banishment was most fond of. Wasn't Sword Chi the most closely related to swords? But could such a fragile piece of paper really withstand the tyrannical Sword Chi? Nangongzhi didn't know, but Nangongzhi could only think of such a choice. He had no choice but to inject a very small amount of Sword Chi into the scroll painting. What was Sword Chi? It was a type of energy that mainly attacked and killed. Although Nangongzhi only used a very small amount of Sword Chi, the effect was very significant. The Sword Chi and the decaying aura that was originally corroding the scroll suddenly formed a different kind of connection. The decaying aura became denser under the stimulation of the Sword Chi, and the Sword Chi seemed to feel that it had to fight against the decaying aura. It constantly devoured the decaying aura to nourish itself, becoming stronger and stronger. This is really, looking at the scroll painting that was corroding faster, Nangongzhi only wanted to knock his head hard. Why did he suddenly think of injecting Sword Chi into it? What else? What else was the most closely related to the Banishment Senior? If it wasn't a sword, then what was the favorite thing of the Banishment Senior? The thing that the senior banishment senior liked, wine? Good wine? The drunken immortal wine in the green jade gourd that the senior banishment senior gave him? Although the choice of wine was a bit of a joke, at this moment, the scroll painting was corroding faster and faster, and Nangongzhi didn't have time to think about the mystery calmly. Nangongzhi took off the green jade gourd on his back and used his mouth to bite open the cork that sealed the gourd. He directly sprinkled the wine on the scroll painting. This was Nangongzhi's last attempt. It was also the last possible attempt that Nangongzhi could make to pass this level. The wine slowly soaked the ink. In just a moment, the ink had turned from black to a blood-red color. Even this works? Nangongzhi was just trying to make a last resort by sprinkling the drunken immortal wine on the scroll painting. He didn't expect it to actually work. As expected. This level is really more difficult than the previous ones. Which disciple of the Blood Cloak Pavilion who came here for such a serious trial would bring wine, especially drunken immortal wine that no one knows how to brew? Without drunken immortal wine, there is no way to remove the ink on the scroll painting. Without removing the ink, how can I pass this level? At this moment, Nangongzhi only felt that the banishment senior was indeed evil. Wasn't he deliberately making things difficult for others? Ha ha ha. Life's two pleasures are sword and wine. Suddenly, Nangongzhi heard a faint sound. It was like a person singing with a sword while drinking to his heart's content. Not only did it sound in his ears, but it also seemed to appear in front of Nangongzhi's eyes. Although he couldn't see the person's figure clearly, he was holding a sword in his hand. The heavenly calamity sword. This must be the banishment senior. In the image, the banishment senior was holding a brush. However, it wasn't the posture of an ordinary person writing. Instead, it was as if he was holding a sword. Drops of ink dripped from the brush. However, in mid-air, there was an invisible force that dragged the ink back to the tip of the brush. Painting? Writing? I'm not good at any of those. I only know how to wield a sword. Since I'm going to paint, I have to paint like a sword. After saying that, the banishment senior's aura, which had been slightly scattered due to drinking, was instantly restrained. His eyes, which were originally filled with a sense of sharpness, were now restrained. He looked like an ordinary person. Just like that, the banishment senior took the brush and drew on a piece of white paper in front of him. It was the ink painting that Nangongzhi was carefully looking at. Chapter 172. Puff, like a bubble bursting, everything in front of Nangongzhi seemed to turn into countless bubbles in an instant, floating away without a trace. Whether it was the sound of banishment or the figure of banishment, they all disappeared with the bubbles at this moment. Only the scroll painting in Nangongzhi's hand was left. Whether it was the rotten aura that had been corroding the scroll painting, or the sword chi injected by Nangongzhi, they all disappeared in an instant, and the blood-red lines on the ink on the scroll painting also disappeared without a trace. Only the traces of Nangongzhi's wine were still faintly visible. Am I enlightened? Nangongzhi asked himself, but found that he didn't understand. He just stared blankly at the scroll painting in his hand, not knowing what to say. In front of Nangongzhi, a dragon pattern token surrounded by some yellow aura was still floating. Nangongzhi reached out and took the token in his hand. Following the brilliance of the token, he left the crypt. Perhaps only the half-corroded scroll painting placed on the stone table by Nangongzhi could prove that Nangongzhi had come here to accept this trial. He still came to the back of the golden dragon, but there was no arch in front of him. Nangongzhi was in a trance. His goal here was very simple. It was to pass these levels and then become the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, adding a few chips to his survival in the ninja world. However, after passing such a few levels, Nangongzhi didn't know if he could be qualified to become the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion once he became the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. From the beginning, from the words of the several altar lords, Nangongzhi could faintly find that although the banishment elder he respected was the head of the blood cloth pavilion, he had never intervened. Although this has something to do with the character of the banishment elder, that kind of personality is afraid of trouble, he would definitely not accept such a troublesome position. However, wasn't part of the reason also because it was too heavy to bear the burden of the lives of all the members of the organization on his shoulders? Nangongzhi thought about such a problem, his pace did not stop, and he kept walking forward along the back of the golden dragon. Not knowing how long he walked, Nangongzhi freed himself from his thoughts and found that he was already standing on the huge head of the golden dragon. Compared to the 8 dragons that turned into arches before, the golden dragon was extraordinarily large. Nangongzhi moved his body a little bit closer to the golden dragon's horn, but found that his body was not as thick as the golden dragon's horn. This golden dragon should be the last level, right? From the beginning, I have already stepped on the golden dragon level. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, they really have a different order. But, what kind of level is this? According to the previous levels, the banishment elder should have introduced the specific content of the level to Nangongzhi, but there was nothing this time. The surroundings were extremely quiet, and even the sound of the breeze was very clear in Nangongzhi's ears. Roar! The golden dragon under Nangongzhi's feet suddenly began to sway, and a dragon's roar was heard. The sound was very loud, and it even formed a wave of air that impacted the surrounding space. Countless clouds were scattered by the dragon's roar. After the golden dragon roared, it suddenly opened its 4 claws, and clouds of mist condensed under its claws. Not long after, the golden dragon's body was covered by the mist, and the golden dragon itself began to fly. Nangongzhi quickly grabbed the golden dragon's horn that was relatively close to him, and stabilized his body. He braved the fierce wind and flew in the sky with the golden dragon. Nangongzhi no longer had the energy to calculate the passage of time, because the strong wind made Nangongzhi have to be careful not to fall off the golden dragon's head. When Nangongzhi opened his eyes that were unable to open because of the fierce wind, Nangongzhi found himself on the shore of a lake. It was not appropriate to call it the surface of a lake, because this so-called lake did not exist on the ground. The lake was suspended in the sky as if it was being dragged by white clouds. The color of the sky was reflected on the surface of the lake, and the lakeside was dyed a dazzling blue. Traces of mist condensed on the surface of the lake, and from time to time, its body twisted and swayed, giving off an ethereal feeling. If this world really had a so-called fairyland, Nangongzhi believed that this place must be a fairyland. It really suits Senior Banishment's taste. If I can stay in a place like this for a period of time without any distractions, I believe that I will definitely make progress on the path of inner strength and swordsmanship. Because this place is really suitable for calming down and improving my own shortcomings. Nangongzhi stood on the shore and looked at his reflection on the surface of the lake, and for a moment, he was filled with emotions. Trying to put his feet on the surface of the lake, Nangongzhi found that an invisible force appeared from the lake, and it formed a balance with his own strength. Sure enough, I can step on it. For some reason, when Nangongzhi saw such a flat surface of the lake, he could not help but have the thought of stepping on it. He stretched out his feet to test it, and it was really possible to step on it. Presumably, the trial for this stage is in the distant misty clouds, right? Nangongzhi looked at the clouds in the distance and began to guess. Since there were a total of 5 trials, and he was on a lake that could allow people to step on, it was not difficult to guess that his last trial would be in the depths of the clouds. Step by step, he stepped on the surface of the lake, and the wind carried a unique fishy smell to Nangongzhi's nose. Wisps of coolness spread from Nangongzhi's feet to his entire body. Under the influence of these two, Nangongzhi felt that his mind had become exceptionally calm. Even his mental strength had become exceptionally sensitive. There's more? Looks like this trial is not that simple. Nangongzhi knew that there was no free lunch in this trial. In the arch of the earthen dragon gate, there were no obstructions throughout the entire trial. Now that he thought about it, how unbearable would the final trial be? With the help of the lake's surface, his body and mental strength had been adjusted to their best condition. This proved that he would definitely have to risk his life in the final trial. The final trial would definitely be the most difficult one. Chapter 173. After clearing away the fog in front of him, Nangongzhi entered the center of the lake, which was most likely the place where the final trial would take place. A huge mysterious rune was engraved on the surface of the lake through some unknown method. Originally, the closer one was to the center of the lake, the thicker the fog was. However, the fog here seemed to have been forcibly driven away, making the surroundings exceptionally bright. Whoosh! The 4 tokens that Nangongzhi obtained from the previous trials suddenly flew out and landed on the blind spots of the formation one by one. The dragon aura token that was originally entwined with the light representing each of the 5 elements suddenly became particularly dazzling. These lights instantly turned into a green dragon that represented the wood element, a blue dragon that represented the water element, a red dragon that represented the fire element, and a yellow dragon that represented the earth element. After the 4 dragons were condensed, they each let out a dragon roar and flew towards Nangongzhi with a majestic aura. They wrapped around Nangongzhi's body and slowly flew towards the center of the formation with Nangongzhi. When Nangongzhi stood firmly in the center of the formation, the 4 dragons also rushed towards the center of the formation under Nangongzhi's feet. In an instant, the formation under Nangongzhi's feet became particularly dazzling. Even with Nangongzhi's eyesight, he was a little dazzled by the strong light at this moment. Hee. We actually face each other like this again. This really makes me feel that it's a little fun. Nangongzhi heard a familiar voice in his ear. This voice was really too familiar to Nangongzhi. Because this was his own voice. The only thing that could possibly have the same voice as him was his own inner demon that had been sealed in his spiritual space. It turned out to be like this. Nangongzhi seemed to have figured out something. The trial actually began the moment I stepped on the back of the golden dragon. The mysterious power that let you get out of my control came from the golden dragon, right? Nangongzhi looked at his inner demon and said his guess. I didn't know where the power came from at first, but until just now, when you activated this formation, a greater power than the beginning rushed into my body again. Even the spiritual power wall you left behind couldn't block this power at all. Even in the end, I could directly appear in front of you with the power of the formation. Sure enough. Even the heavens couldn't bear to see you humiliating the heavens' retribution sword, so they gave me a second chance to fight with you. The inner demon smiled and recounted what she had just experienced to her true self. As long as I can kill you, I can rely on the power of the formation to completely replace you and become the true Yama of the shinobi world. Without the home field advantage of the spiritual space, what can you use to fight me? Without hesitation, the inner demon said his purpose. Presumably, in the consciousness of the inner demon, he was suppressed by Nangongzhi in the spiritual space because of Nangongzhi's control of the spiritual space. As long as he doesn't have such a disadvantage, the two of them are almost on the same level. The inner demon is more ruthless than Nangongzhi. It doesn't seem impossible to defeat Nangongzhi and replace Nangongzhi. It seems that the requirement of this level is to eliminate the inner demon by myself. It's interesting, since this trial gave me such an opportunity, how can I not grasp it well? As long as I can eliminate this inner demon this time, I think I will have a huge improvement, right? Nangongzhi didn't care that his inner demon was still standing in front of him. He had already begun to think about the various benefits after he defeated the inner demon. When the inner demon saw Nangongzhi's attitude, it naturally burned with anger, even its face became ferocious. Sure enough. Although the inner demon is more insidious and ruthless, after all, the inner demon is an existence formed by some negative emotions. Compared to me, it is more irritable and extreme. When the mentality is unbalanced, it will lead to more flaws in the inner demon. The two of us are one. My inner demon is also clear in my heart. If I want to defeat the inner demon, I can only start from the loopholes in its emotions. That's right, what Nan Gongzhi said before was just a test of his own guesses. It was also the key to Nan Gongzhi's belief that he could defeat his inner demon. Although the inner demon didn't say it before, Nan Gongzhi knew that the inner demon must have received some kind of blessing from the formation, otherwise, it wouldn't be so confident to say that it will kill him and then replace him. Perhaps, the inner demon's combat power at this moment is much higher than his. The inner demon seemed to have become in a state of uncontrollable anger. It pulled out the long sword in its hand that looked exactly the same as the disaster sword and rushed towards Nan Gongzhi. At first, the inner demon's pace didn't change, it was as if it was rushing straight. However, halfway through, two figures suddenly split from the inner demon's body. It was as if the inner demon had forcibly turned into three people. As a cultivator of internal force, he can't use ninjutsu like a ninja who cultivates chakra, but he can rely on his own speed to create illusions. Even if it was practiced to a high level, it would be able to replace any illusionary body at any time to attack the enemy. Nan Gongzhi also knew this move, but it didn't seem to be as smooth as the inner demon's. Nan Gongzhi carefully looked at the three figures of the inner demon, but found that he couldn't determine which one was the true body of the inner demon. Sure enough, this formation has a special effect on the inner demon. Since he couldn't determine which one was the true body, he would just block all of them. The three figures of the inner demon had already arrived in front of Nan Gongzhi in an instant, and the three of them attacked at the same time. One used a long sword to stab Nan Gongzhi's eyebrows, one used a sword to cut Nan Gongzhi's right arm, and the last figure bent down, as if it wanted to cut Nan Gongzhi's hamstring. As long as he could see the movements of the inner demon, Nan Gongzhi was confident that he could compete with the inner demon. Nan Gongzhi raised his left foot and stepped on the sword that was about to cut his hamstring. However, he didn't feel like he stepped on it at all. Obviously, it was just an illusion. With a wave of his right hand, the disaster sword's edge cut the throat of the inner demon that wanted to cut off his right arm, but it still felt like an illusion. "It's you." Nan Gongzhi pushed out his left hand with internal force, and directly slapped the abdomen of the inner demon that wanted to stab the sword between his eyebrows. Chapter 174. Nan Gongzhi felt the illusory sensation again. He knew that the inner demon who was holding a long sword and was about to stab him between his eyebrows was also an illusion. A gust of wind came from behind his head. Was this the killing move of the inner demon? Nan Gongzhi quickly swept the long sword in his hand behind him. The sound of metal clashing could be heard. It was a close call. Nan Gongzhi blocked the true killing move of the inner demon. "I thought that splitting into two phantoms was your limit, but I didn't expect you to be able to split into three phantoms so vividly." Nan Gongzhi exerted force on his feet to create distance between himself and the inner demon. However, the inner demon was extremely fast. It was almost sticking to Nan Gongzhi's retreating figure. The distance between the two did not increase at all. Instead, it got closer. He. "There are many things that you don't know," the inner demon looked at Nan Gongzhi's face and said with a strange smile. "Indeed, this array formation has given you quite a bit of power. These footwork techniques that create illusions are still in their embryonic form in my mind, but you are already proficient in using them?" Nan Gongzhi looked at the inner demon and said calmly. "But, relying on the formation's support for you. Is it really fun to use such a method to defeat me?" Nan Gongzhi was not so much a ninja as he was a more traditional cultivator. Every time he fought with others, Nan Gongzhi hoped to use his own skills to fight. Nan Gongzhi did not reject the idea. After all, Nan Gongzhi often wore Li Yang's black armor to fight. However, as long as it was a problem that could be solved with his own strength, Nan Gongzhi rarely summoned Li Yang. "As expected of my original body." You're so stubborn. The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi and said sarcastically. I don't care if you're stubborn or pretentious. Only the power that was truly cultivated by oneself was the most suitable power for oneself. This is my own request, it has nothing to do with anyone else. Nangongzhi did not lose his composure because of the inner demon's mockery. He continued to speak calmly. Then you can hold on to your pitiful pride and let me kill you and replace you. My true body. The demon slowly sank to the bottom of the lake and disappeared from Nangongzhi's sight. Only this sentence was left, still echoing in the surrounding space. Nangongzhi knew that the inner demon was only temporarily gone. Now, the inner demon was like a venomous snake staring at its prey. As long as there was a chance, the inner demon would never be soft-hearted and bite him viciously. Nangongzhi held the Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand and slightly arched his back. His mind was completely focused. Swish, Nangongzhi suddenly jumped up, and a sword chi shot out from the water where Nangongzhi was just standing. Before Nangongzhi fell from the sky, several more sword chi shot out. Each sword chi was aimed at the vital parts of Nangongzhi's body. Nangongzhi, who was in the air, had lost his footing. If this continued, his body would soon be pierced by the sword chi. You're not the only one who knows how to control sword chi. Nangongzhi shook the Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand. A sword chi shot out from the Heaven's Calamity sword and directly slashed under Nangongzhi's feet. Nangongzhi saw the opportunity and stepped on the sword chi. He suddenly used his agile body technique and his body jumped up like a bird. Nangongzhi moved to the side and dodged several sword chis. The remaining sword chis were also destroyed by Nangongzhi's Heavenly Calamity sword. Come out! Nangongzhi shouted. More and more sword chi was born from the Heaven's Calamity sword. In an instant, dozens of sword chi had already wrapped around Nangongzhi's body. Nangongzhi held the Heaven Calamity sword and pointed it downwards. Suddenly, Nangongzhi fell towards the surface of the lake like 1,000-pound weight. Bang! The huge force directly shook the lake water into mist, and at the same time, it also made a huge sound. The moment the tip of the sword touched the lake, the sword chi wrapped around Nangongzhi's body flew in the direction of the Heaven's Calamity sword. Like sharks hunting for their prey, Nangongzhi's sword chi wandered around the lake, killing everything in its path. Nangongzhi obviously wanted to use this method to force his inner demon out of the lake so that it would be easier for him to fight it. The sword chi's effect was very obvious. The inner demon's body that was hidden in the lake was forcibly forced out. There was even a small tear at the corner of the inner demon's clothes. It must have been caused by the sword chi that was injected into the lake. The inner demon did not speak. He just held the long sword in his hand and rushed towards Nangongzhi. This time, there were no afterimages because the inner demon knew that this was a trick that could only be used once. His original body must be on guard against his doppelgangers. Since that was the case, he might as well fight directly. The long sword in the inner demon's hand trembled slightly. There were even some phantoms on the body of the sword. Using this method of vibration to increase the speed and strength of the long sword in his hand was really a good trick. Nangongzhi sighed slightly in his heart. However, he did not directly apply it to his swordsmanship. Although this method was simple, it required a lot of practice to integrate this trick into his swordsmanship. Otherwise, he would be a complete troublemaker. The power of his swordsmanship might be reduced because he was not familiar with the technique. Just as he was about to get close to Nangongzhi, the inner demon's arms suddenly moved. The high speed made the inner demon look like he had 2 more arms. This was not a trick like the previous illusion. As long as the inner demon was willing, each of the illusionary long swords would be a full blow. Nangongzhi was very familiar with this swordsmanship. It was the fatal 13 swords that his sister, Nangongro, had taught him a long time ago. The fatal 13 swords was a swordsmanship that did not care about the form. Every move was a fight to the death. Every move was filled with murderous intent. The inner demon's temperament was different from his. When he used the fatal 13 swords, he was filled with murderous intent. Nangongzhi also raised the Heaven's Disaster sword in his hand and fought against the inner demon's moves. Even if he did not have the same power as the inner demon when he used the fatal 13 swords, Nangongzhi was someone who had completely mastered the fatal 13 swords. Nangongzhi still had a certain degree of confidence in the most basic way of countering each move. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.